Hello there, and welcome to another deep dive into the mysteries that shape our world. Before we begin, I'm curious. How has your day been treating you? What time is it where you are right now? And what corner of this vast world are you listening from? Whether you're settling in for the evening, starting your morning, or somewhere in between, I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time exploring the shadows of hidden history with us. If you find yourself drawn to these stories of suppressed truths and forgotten discoveries, please consider subscribing to Sleep Theories. Your support helps us continue uncovering the narratives that powerful forces would prefer remain buried. Now, let me tell you about a frequency that could have changed everything, and the man who paid the ultimate price for discovering it, Dr. Lionel Ashcroft's personal audio log. July 3rd, 1953, 11:47 p.m. The oscilloscope doesn't lie. 27.6 kHz, amplitude modulated at precisely 440 Hz. Under the microscope I watch them die, not the patient's healthy cells, but the malignant ones. They simply ruptured, like tiny balloons filled with water, exposed to a sound they couldn't withstand. Margaret thinks I'm losing my mind. She found me in the basement laboratory at 3 a.m. again, surrounded by frequency generators and slides of tissue samples. How do I explain to my wife that I may have stumbled upon the most significant medical breakthrough in human history? How do I tell her that the Wellmere Trust didn't fund this research out of philanthropic interest, but because they know exactly what I'm chasing? The mathematics are elegant in their simplicity. Every cell has its own resonant frequency, the rate at which its molecular structure naturally vibrates. Healthy cells, with their organised DNA and regulated mitosis, maintain frequencies within a predictable range. But cancer cells, with their chaotic reproduction and damaged genetic code, vibrate at distinctly different rates. They're like instruments out of tune in an otherwise harmonious orchestra. Royal Rife was onto something in the 1930s, though his approach was crude compared to what we can achieve now. Where he used visible light frequencies, I've discovered that radio waves, properly modulated, can penetrate deeper into tissue while maintaining their destructive precision against malignant cells. The implications terrify me as much as they exhilarate me. Wellmere Trust Internal Memorandum of July 8th, 1953. Classification restricted. From Director Harrison Blackwood. To Board of Trustees. Ashcroft Project Status Update. Gentlemen, Dr. Ashcroft's progress exceeds our most optimistic projections. His frequency-based therapy has demonstrated a 96% success rate in destroying laboratory-cultured carcinoma cells while leaving healthy tissue completely unharmed. More importantly, his first human trials, conducted without institutional oversight or FDA knowledge, show equally promising results. However, I must report growing concerns about the doctor's discretion. He has begun questioning the terms of our funding agreement and has expressed desire to publish his findings in mainstream medical journals. As discussed in our previous meeting, such disclosure would be problematic for our stakeholders in the pharmaceutical sector. I recommend we proceed to Phase 2 of containment protocols immediately. The Ashcroft research must not reach public scrutiny. H. Blackwood, Dr. Lionel Ashcroft's personal audio log, July 16th, 1953, 2:33 a.m. Something is wrong. I returned to the laboratory tonight to find my frequency generators recalibrated and my cell cultures contaminated. This wasn't an accident. Someone with extensive knowledge of my work has been here. Margaret received a phone call today from a man claiming to represent the Medical Ethics Board at Johns Hopkins. He asked pointed questions about my research methods and whether I had been conducting unauthorized human experiments. The caller knew details about my work that I haven't shared with anyone outside the Wellmere Trust. I've made copies of everything: the frequency calculations, the cellular destruction footage, the patient treatment records. I've embedded the mathematical formulas into musical compositions, written in a code only I understand. If something happens to me, perhaps another researcher will one day decipher the melody that could save millions of lives. The Trust owns this building, funds my equipment, pays my salary. I've been so naive to think they wanted to help humanity. They want to control the cure, not release it. I fear I may have discovered something too powerful for the world to handle. Police report, Hartford Fire Department, July 17th, 1953. At approximately 3:47 a.m, officers responded to reports of a structure fire at 1247 Elm Street, identified as the Wellmere Research Facility. Upon arrival, the building was fully engulfed in flames. No personnel were found on the premises. Fire Chief Morton has ruled the cause as electrical failure, likely due to the extensive electronic equipment housed in the basement laboratory. The intense heat of the fire has made recovery of research materials impossible. Dr. Lionel Ashcroft, primary researcher at the facility, has not been located. His vehicle was found abandoned approximately 3 miles from the fire scene. Missing person investigation has been opened. Property damage total, $47,000. Casualties, none confirmed. Status, case closed pending further evidence. Hartford Tribune, July 19th, 1953. Mysterious fire destroys research facility. Local scientist Dr. Lionel Ashcroft remains missing following a devastating fire that completely destroyed the Wellmere Research Facility early Tuesday morning. Police report finding no trace of the prominent biophysicist who had been conducting privately funded medical research at the location. Harrison Blackwood, director of the Wellmere Trust, expressed grief over the incident. Dr. Ashcroft was a brilliant researcher dedicated to advancing medical science. We can only hope he is found safe and unharmed. The fire's intensity prevented investigators from recovering any research materials or determining the exact nature of Dr. Ashcroft's work. Mrs. Margaret Ashcroft declined to comment for this story. Interview transcript. Clara Voss, freelance journalist. Date, October 15th, 2023. Location, St. Mary's Hospice, Philadelphia. Subject, Elias Drumlin, former executive, Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I adjusted my recording device, studying the frail man propped against hospital pillows. Elias Drumlin had contacted me through encrypted channels, claiming he had information about suppressed medical research that would change everything I thought I knew about modern healthcare. At 78, with liver cancer eating him alive, Drumlin had nothing left to lose. "You're the journalist who exposed the CIA's mind control experiments," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Project MK Ultra." "Among other things," I replied. "Your message mentioned something about buried medical research." Drumlin's eyes darted toward the door before he continued. 47 years I worked for Big Pharma. 47 years of watching miracle cures disappear into filing cabinets, of seeing brilliant researchers have their funding cut or their reputations destroyed. He paused to catch his breath, then leaned forward with surprising intensity. "They buried the cure in a frequency, Miss Voss, and a man named Ashcroft died for it." The name meant nothing to me then, but something in Drumlin's tone made me lean closer. "Tell me about Ashcroft." Dr. Lionel Ashcroft disappeared in 1953 after discovering a sound-based cancer treatment. Used radio frequencies to destroy malignant cells without harming healthy tissue. The pharmaceutical industry couldn't let that technology exist. Too much money at stake. Drumlin reached into his bedside table and pulled out a manila folder, his hands shaking. "I kept copies, company memos, patent applications that were mysteriously rejected, death certificates of researchers who got too close to rediscovering Ashcroft's work." I opened the folder. The first document was a Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals internal memo dated 1987, marked Confidential Project Silencer. "We maintained a watch list," Drumlin continued. "Scientists working on frequency-based therapies, electromagnetic field research, anything that might lead back to Ashcroft's discovery. When someone got close, we'd either recruit them, discredit them, or what? Use your imagination, Miss Voss." Personal research notes, Clara Voss. October 20th, 2023. 5 days of digging through archived medical journals and suppressed research papers. The name Ashcroft appears exactly once in mainstream scientific literature. A brief mention in the proceedings of the 1954 International Symposium on Experimental Biophysics. The reference is cryptic. The unfortunate loss of Dr. Ashcroft and his promising work on cellular resonance frequencies. That's it. Nothing else in 69 years of medical publications. But the absence of information is information itself. I've located Dr. Ashcroft's daughter, Isolde Ashcroft Chen, now 73 and living in Portland, Oregon. According to public records, she's been fighting a legal battle for decades to have her father declared officially dead so she can access his personal effects, which remain sealed in a safety deposit box. She agreed to meet with me. Interview transcript, Clara Voss, October 25th, 2023. Location, Pioneer Courthouse Square, Portland, Oregon. Subject, Isolde Ashcroft Chen. Isolde Ashcroft Chen sat across from me at a small cafe table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Despite her age, her eyes held the sharp intelligence I imagined her father possessed. I was 21 when he disappeared, she began without preamble, old enough to understand that the official story was bullshit. What do you remember about his work? He was obsessed with sound. Our house was always filled with strange tones and frequencies. He'd play these haunting melodies on the piano, compositions he claimed contained mathematical formulas. Mother thought he was having a breakdown. Isolde pulled out an old photograph showing a man in a lab coat standing next to complex electronic equipment. This was taken a week before the fire. Look at his face, Miss Voss. Does this look like a man planning to abandon his family and disappear forever? The photograph showed Dr. Ashcroft smiling with obvious excitement, his eyes bright with discovery. Not the expression of someone contemplating escape. The night he vanished, I heard him in his study until almost 3 a.m. He was recording something, speaking into his dictaphone in that careful, precise way he used for his research logs. I crept downstairs and listened at the door. What did you hear? He kept saying the same phrase over and over, 27.6 kilohertz, amplitude modulated at 440 hertz. Then he said something about hiding the truth in music, where they'd never think to look. Isolde's voice broke slightly. The next morning, he was gone. The research facility burned down. The police found his abandoned car but never found him. They claimed he staged his own disappearance, but I know better. My father didn't run away, Miss Voss. Someone made him disappear. She slid a small brass key across the table. Safety deposit box at First National Bank. I've been fighting for 70 years to access whatever he left behind. Maybe it's time someone with your reputation took a look. Personal Research Notes, Clara Voss, November 2nd, 2023. The safety deposit box contained a treasure trove of documents Isolde had never been allowed to access. Among them, sheet music for 12 compositions titled Healing Frequencies, mathematical equations written in the margins, and a letter addressed to whoever finds this. The letter in Dr. Ashcroft's handwriting begins, "If you're reading this, then the forces I feared have succeeded in stopping my work. But truth has a way of resonating through time. More importantly, I found an invitation to the 2023 International Conference on Advanced Oncology Research in Geneva, apparently sent to Dr. Ashcroft's old address and forwarded through various channels for 70 years before reaching Isolde. Someone still thinks Dr. Ashcroft might show up. Leaked conference materials, Geneva Medical Summit, November 8th, 2023. Obtained by C. Voss through insider source. I spent 3 days in Geneva, posing as a medical journalist covering breakthrough cancer therapies. The official presentations were standard pharmaceutical fare, new drug combinations, immunotherapy advances, nothing revolutionary. But on the final day, I gained access to a restricted session titled Historical Suppression Models in Medical Innovation. The presenter was Dr. Heinrich Volker, a researcher I'd never heard of representing something called the Medical Heritage Foundation. His presentation included a slide that made my blood run cold, energetic suppression models, case studies, Royal Raymond Rife, 1888 to 1971, frequency therapy, pioneer, Dr. Lionel Ashcroft, 1916 to 1953, cellular resonance research, Dr. Huldah Clark, 1928 to 2009, bioelectric treatment protocols. Status: all research lines successfully terminated. Successfully terminated. During the coffee break, I approached a younger researcher who had been taking extensive notes during Volker's presentation. Dr. Niels Marlowe, electromagnetic field specialist from Cambridge, was clearly disturbed by what he'd heard. "This isn't medical history," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "This is a hit list." Interview transcript: Clara Voss, November 8th, 2023. Location: Hotel Beau Rivage, Geneva. Subject: Dr. Niels Marlowe, Cambridge University. Marlowe agreed to meet me privately after recognising my name from previous investigative reports. At 34, he represented a new generation of researchers beginning to question the official narrative surrounding suppressed medical technologies. "I've been studying electromagnetic field therapy for 12 years, he began. "The mathematics behind frequency-based cellular destruction are sound. In fact, they're elegant. But every time someone gets close to practical application, their funding disappears or their research gets classified. You think there's an active suppression campaign? I know there is. The US Patent Office maintains what's unofficially called the Dangerous Disruption List. Patent applications for technologies deemed too disruptive to existing economic models. Frequency-based medical devices top that list." Marlowe pulled out his laptop and showed me patent application after patent application, all rejected for national security reasons or insufficient evidence of efficacy. "Look at the mathematical formulas in these applications," he said, pointing to equations that looked remarkably similar to those in Dr. Ashcroft's hidden compositions. They're all variations on the same theme. Someone keeps rediscovering Ashcroft's work and someone keeps burying it. How many researchers have gotten close? 17 that I can document over the past 30 years. 12 died in accidents. 3 committed suicide. 2 simply vanished. The room suddenly felt very cold. "Dr. Marlowe, would you be willing to help me decode Dr. Ashcroft's musical compositions?" He stared at me for a long moment before nodding. "Miss Voss, if Ashcroft really embedded his frequency formulas in musical notation, and if those formulas actually work, we're talking about the medical discovery of the century, possibly the millennium, and the biggest cover-up in modern history." "Exactly." Encrypted email: Dr. Niels Marlowe to Clara Voss, November the 12th, 2023. Subject: Urgent pattern recognition. "Clara, I've been analysing the sheet music you provided. The mathematical precision is extraordinary. Each composition encodes specific frequency ranges, amplitude modulations, and harmonic progressions that correspond to cellular resonance patterns. But here's what's disturbing. I ran these formulas through modern cancer cell models using computer simulations. The predicted cellular destruction rates match exactly with the success rates mentioned in Drumlin's pharmaceutical memos. Ashcroft's therapy would have worked. There's no doubt in my mind. I've also discovered something else. 3 research teams in the past 5 years have published papers on electromagnetic field therapy that unknowingly reproduced elements of Ashcroft's work. All 3 teams have since disbanded following equipment failures, funding cuts, or personnel changes. Someone is still watching. Someone is still suppressing this research. We need to meet. I think I know where Ashcroft's original equipment might be. North Personal Journal, Clara Voss, November 15th, 2023. Marlowe's research has revealed a paper trail leading to an abandoned Cold War research facility in Wales. According to declassified documents, Dr. Petra Lang, Ashcroft's former assistant, relocated to the UK after his disappearance and continued working on frequency-based medical research under British intelligence oversight. The facility was decommissioned in 1987, but Marlowe believes Lang's equipment may still be there. We're flying to Cardiff tomorrow. I've taken precautions. Copies of all documents sent to multiple journalists, automatic upload scheduled if I don't check in within 72 hours. If Drumlin was right about the lengths these people will go to protect their secrets, this could be dangerous. But the world deserves to know the truth about the cure they buried. Field Notes, Clara Voss, November 18th, 2023. Location: Abandoned Research Facility, Brecon Beacons, Wales. The bunker sits hidden in the Welsh countryside like a concrete tumour buried in green hills. According to Marlowe's intelligence contacts, this facility housed classified medical research from 1954 to 1987, including Dr. Petra Lang's continuation of Ashcroft's frequency experiments. We arrived at dawn, equipped with electromagnetic field detectors, portable recording equipment, and 30 years of suppressed research papers. The facility's outer security was long since abandoned, but the inner laboratories required Marlowe's electronic expertise to access. Lang didn't just continue Ashcroft's work, Marlowe explained as we descended into the underground complex. She perfected it. The main laboratory was a time capsule from the 1980s. Analog frequency generators, primitive computers, and walls covered with electromagnetic field calculations. But at the centre of the room sat something that made my breath catch. A complete frequency therapy device labelled Ashcroft Protocol Mark 7. Jesus Christ, Marlowe whispered, it's all here. Audio recording, Clara Voss. November 18th, 2023, 2:47 p.m. Location, Underground Laboratory, Wales. We've been here for 6 hours, documenting everything. The laboratory contains not just Lang's equipment, but her complete research files. 33 years of frequency therapy development, patient treatment records, and correspondence with intelligence agencies. According to her notes, Lang successfully treated over 400 cancer patients between 1954 and 1987 using refined versions of Ashcroft's frequency protocols. The success rate was 94%. 94%. Marlowe is currently downloading data from Lang's computer systems. The frequency generators still function. We've tested them on tissue samples we brought from Cambridge. The cancer cells rupture exactly as Ashcroft's original logs described. But here's the most chilling discovery. Lang's final research notes, dated December 1987, describe visits from American pharmaceutical representatives offering her retirement packages in exchange for destroying her work. Her last entry reads, "They've given me 2 weeks to dismantle everything. I've hidden backup devices in 3 locations. Someone will eventually rediscover what Lionel started. The truth resonates through time." Emergency audio log, Dr. Niels Marlowe, November 18th, 2023, 4:23 p.m. Clara is outside uploading files to our secure servers while I finish documenting the frequency generators. We've discovered calibration notes in Lang's handwriting that improve on Ashcroft's original formulas by over 30%. This technology could eliminate cancer as a terminal disease within a decade. But I'm hearing vehicles approaching, multiple engines moving fast. Clara was right to take precautions. If something happens to us, the truth is already out there. We've uploaded everything to WikiLeaks, sent copies to 12 medical journals, and programmed automatic releases to major news outlets. They can stop us, but they can't stop the signal. Incident report, classified, November 18th, 2023. Location, Brecon Beacons facility. Operation, silent frequency. Subjects Clara Voss and Dr. Niels Marlowe were intercepted during unauthorized access to decommissioned research facility. Subject Marlowe was detained for questioning. Subject Voss escaped on foot with unknown quantity of classified materials. Facility has been secured and all remaining research materials destroyed per Protocol 7. Cover story of gas leak explosion prepared for local authorities. Dr. Marlowe's interrogation is ongoing. Subject claims to have already disseminated research data, but digital forensics have confirmed successful interception of all upload attempts. Recommend immediate media suppression protocols and academic discreditation campaign against Subject Voss. Text message thread, Clara Voss to unknown number, November 19th, 2023. Clara, are you receiving this? Unknown. Who is this? Clara, friend of Niels. He gave me this number before they took him. Unknown. Clara Voss? Clara. Yes. Do you have the files? Unknown. Safe and uploaded. Guardian, Times, Post and 3 medical journals have copies. Clara. When? Unknown. 1 hour ago. The world is about to learn about Ashcroft. Part 5. The Cure They Buried. The Guardian Online, November 20th, 2023. Exclusive. Leaked documents reveal 70-year cover-up of cancer cure by Clara Voss. Classified documents obtained by this reporter reveal that a frequency-based cancer treatment developed in 1953 has been systematically suppressed by pharmaceutical interests and intelligence agencies for over 70 years. Dr. Lionel Ashcroft, a biophysicist who disappeared in 1953, discovered that specific radio frequencies could destroy cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue unharmed. According to leaked research data, the treatment showed a 94% success rate in clinical applications. The documents detail a coordinated campaign to suppress Ashcroft's research, including the destruction of his laboratory, the disappearance of the scientist himself, and the systematic elimination of any researchers who attempted to recreate his work. Social media response, November 20th to 21st, 2023. Breaking medical. Holy shit. If this Ashcroft story is real, every cancer patient has been robbed for 70 years. Ashcroft Files. Skeptical Doc. Frequency therapy. This is the same pseudoscience that's been debunked for decades. Don't fall for conspiracy theories, medical misinformation. A pharma truth. Clara Voss is a known conspiracy theorist. This leaked document story is fabricated to sell her upcoming book. Fake news. Cancer survivor. 2019. My oncologist just told me frequency therapy has no scientific basis. But why would they spend 70 years suppressing something that doesn't work? Ashcroft Protocol. WikiLeaks, confirming authenticity of Ashcroft research documents. Frequency-based cellular destruction is mathematically sound. Medical establishment has questions to answer. Fact-check report, Snopes.com, November the 21st, 2023. Claim, frequency-based cancer cure suppressed by Big Pharma. Rating false. While it's true that Dr. Lionel Ashcroft disappeared in 1953 following a laboratory fire, there is no credible scientific evidence supporting the efficacy of frequency-based cancer treatment. The documents published by journalist Clara Voss cannot be independently verified, and similar claims about suppressed cures have been thoroughly debunked by the medical community. The American Cancer Society states, frequency therapy devices have never been proven effective in clinical trials and may delay proper medical treatment. Multiple medical experts have reviewed the leaked documents and confirm they contain basic errors in cellular biology and electromagnetic theory that would be obvious to any qualified researcher. Facebook/Meta content warning, November 22nd, 2023. This post contains information about medical treatments that have been flagged by our fact-checking partners as potentially misleading or harmful. Links to articles about frequency-based cancer therapy have been restricted to prevent the spread of medical misinformation. For accurate information about cancer treatment, please consult with qualified medical professionals or visit cancer.org. Personal Journal, Clara Voss, November the 25th, 2023. The story lasted 4 days before the algorithm killed it. Facebook restricted sharing. Twitter labelled it misleading health information. YouTube removed every video discussing the Ashcroft files. Google's search algorithm buried the original Guardian article under dozens of debunking pieces that appeared within hours of publication. Public interest evaporated as quickly as it had ignited. The leaked documents, containing 70 years of suppressed research, mathematical proofs and clinical evidence, were dismissed as sophisticated forgeries by medical authorities who refused to examine the actual scientific content. Dr. Marlowe's death was reported 3 days ago, officially ruled a suicide following academic disgrace and career destruction. His body was found in the Thames. No note recovered. I know better. Obituary, Cambridge University Newsletter, November 28th, 2023. Dr. Niels Marlowe, 34, electromagnetic field research. The university mourns the loss of Dr. Niels Marlowe, who died November 25th following a prolonged struggle with depression and academic misconduct allegations. Dr. Marlowe's career was permanently damaged after his involvement in promoting fraudulent medical research and conspiracy theories regarding suppressed cancer treatments. His association with discredited journalist Clara Voss led to his suspension from Cambridge and the revocation of his research grants. University officials emphasised that Dr. Marlowe's recent claims about frequency-based medical therapy were completely without scientific merit and should not be considered credible academic work. He is survived by his parents and sister. Private message, encrypted channel, December 1st, 2023. From Redacted. To Clara Voss, Miss Voss. You don't know me, but I knew Niels Marlowe. He contacted me 2 days before his death, claiming he had discovered something that would change everything. He was wrong about one thing. They didn't kill the story by discrediting it. They killed it by making people stop caring. But some of us are still listening. Check your mailbox tomorrow morning. There's something you need to see. A friend. Personal journal, Clara Voss. December 2nd, 2023. The package contained no return address, just a manila envelope with my name written in careful block letters. Inside, a brass key identical to the one Isolde had given me, and a handwritten note. 1247 Elm Street, Hartford, Connecticut. Basement radio room. The frequency still resonates. 1247 Elm Street was the address of Dr. Ashcroft's family home, the house where Isolde grew up, where her father composed his musical equations in the study late at night. According to public records, the house has been abandoned since 1987. Isolde moved to Portland decades ago, unable to bear living with the memories. But someone has been maintaining the property taxes, someone who wanted it preserved. Field notes, Clara Voss. December 5th, 2023, location 1247 Elm Street, Hartford, Connecticut. The house sits like a monument to interrupted genius. 70 years of New England weather have weathered the exterior, but the structure remains sound. The key opened the front door as if it had been waiting for me. Inside, everything was exactly as a 1950s family might have left it. Furniture covered in dust sheets, family photographs on the mantelpiece, a baby grand piano in the front parlour with sheet music still on the stand. The basement was different. Someone had been here recently. The dust was disturbed, and modern electronic equipment sat alongside vintage radio components. At the centre of the room, a shortwave radio still plugged in, still functional, and still playing. The sound was barely audible, a low harmonic tone that seemed to resonate in my bones. I recognised the frequency from Dr. Ashcroft's research notes. 27.6 kHz, amplitude modulated at 440 Hz. The frequency that kills cancer cells. Audio recording found on vintage radio. Recorded December 5th, 2023. Voice analysis, 87% match to Dr. Lionel Ashcroft archive samples. My name is Dr. Lionel Ashcroft. If you are hearing this message, then you have followed the frequency back to its source. I did not die in 1953. I was extracted, rescued by allies who understood what my research represented and what forces would do anything to suppress it. I have spent 70 years in hiding, continuing my work, refining the protocols, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment is now. The treatment works. It has always worked. I have personally treated over 3,000 patients in the past 7 decades, maintaining a success rate of 96.7% across all cancer types and stages. The mathematical proofs are sound. The biological mechanisms are well understood. The only thing standing between humanity and the elimination of cancer as a terminal disease is the economic interest of those who profit from prolonged treatment rather than cure. But truth resonates at its own frequency, and that frequency cannot be silenced forever. To whoever finds this message, I am old now, but my work continues. Look for the second key. Follow the harmonic progression. The cure they buried is about to rise from the grave. Final personal journal entry, Clara Voss, December the 6th, 2023. The package arrived this morning via anonymous courier. Inside, a flash drive labelled Ashcroft Protocol V2.0 for humanitarian use only, and a letter in handwriting I now recognised. Miss Voss, your investigation has impressed me. Your courage in the face of certain retaliation proves you understand what's at stake. The attached files contain everything: frequency calculations refined over 70 years, treatment protocols, patient records, and most importantly, schematics for building frequency therapy devices using readily available components. I am 107 years old. I will not live to see the world embrace this technology, but perhaps I've lived long enough to ensure they cannot bury it again. Upload these files everywhere. Make them impossible to suppress. Let the frequency of truth resonate across the globe. The cure was never lost. It was only waiting for the right moment to be found. Dr. Lionel Ashcroft. I'm writing this from a coffee shop in downtown Hartford, using their public Wi-Fi to upload Dr. Ashcroft's final research to every medical database, research repository, and file sharing platform I can access. The files are spreading faster than they can be taken down, translated into dozens of languages, downloaded by researchers, doctors, and ordinary people who have lost loved ones to a disease that could have been cured 70 years ago. This time, the frequency will not be silenced. This time, the truth resonates. Global News Alert. December the 7th, 2023. Medical researchers worldwide are scrambling to verify the authenticity of research files that have appeared simultaneously on hundreds of platforms, claiming to contain complete treatment protocols for frequency-based cancer therapy. The files attributed to missing scientist Dr. Lionel Ashcroft include detailed instructions for building electromagnetic field devices using common electronic components. Several independent research teams have announced plans to begin immediate verification studies, despite pharmaceutical industry warnings about dangerous medical misinformation. The story continues to develop. Final audio log, Dr. Lionel Ashcroft. Date unknown. The frequency of truth cannot be suppressed forever. It finds a way to resonate through time, through consciousness, through the very fabric of reality itself. They buried my cure, but they could not bury the mathematics that govern the universe. They silenced my voice, but they could not silence the harmonic progression that destroys malignant cells while healing healthy ones. To every researcher who will carry this work forward, to every patient who will benefit from treatments they tried to steal from humanity, to every person who refuses to accept that profit should triumph over healing, the frequency still resonates. The cure was never lost, it was only waiting to be found. End of transmission. 6 months after the Ashcroft files went viral, the first independent verification studies began publishing results. The frequency-based cellular destruction protocols worked exactly as described in the 70-year-old research. Major pharmaceutical companies launched immediate legal challenges, claiming patent infringement on proprietary electromagnetic therapy technologies, inadvertently confirming they had been developing similar treatments in secret for decades. The algorithms of silence proved less effective in the digital age. Truth, it seemed, really did resonate at its own frequency, and that frequency could no longer be suppressed. Dr. Clara Voss disappeared 3 weeks after her final journal entry. Her apartment was found empty, with no signs of struggle. Security cameras showed her leaving voluntarily with a small suitcase and a knowing smile. Some say she's continuing her investigation from hiding. Others believe she joined the network of researchers working to distribute Ashcroft's technology worldwide. But late at night, if you tune a shortwave radio to 27.6 kHz and listen carefully, you might hear a faint harmonic tone, the frequency of healing, the sound of truth that refuses to be silenced. The Ashcroft protocol lives on, transmitted through the airwaves by those who understand that some discoveries are too important to remain buried. In research labs and basement workshops around the world, people are building the devices that pharmaceutical giants spent 70 years ensuring would never exist. Cancer rates are beginning to drop in ways that statisticians cannot explain through conventional treatments alone. Patients are experiencing remissions that medical textbooks insist are impossible. The frequency of healing spreads like a virus through the scientific community, unstoppable, undeniable, and ultimately unstoppable. Dr. Lionel Ashcroft may have spent 7 decades in hiding, but his greatest discovery has finally found its voice. The cure they buried has risen from the grave, resonating at the frequency of hope itself. And somewhere in the static between radio stations, if you listen with more than your ears, you can still hear the echo of a man who refused to let humanity's greatest healing tool remain silent forever. The frequency continues to resonate. The truth cannot be buried twice. The retired military satellite KH-14B hadn't been active for 3 years. Officially decommissioned after budget cuts forced the Pentagon to consolidate their orbital surveillance network. So when Nova Chen's custom frequency scanner picked up an encrypted data burst routing through its dormant transponder at 3:47 a.m, she knew someone was playing with fire. "Lynx, you need to see this," she calls across the converted warehouse that serves as their operations centre. The space looks like a digital graveyard. Servers humming in stacks, screens casting blue light across walls covered in network diagrams and corporate org charts connected by red string. "Welcome to the underground." Lynx Rodriguez slides his chair over, steam rising from his 4th cup of coffee. At 32, his face carries the weight of someone who's seen the machinery of power from the inside. Former NSA turned whistleblower turned ghost. What's the signature? Military-grade encryption, but it's using deprecated protocols. Whoever sent this wanted it to look old, forgotten. Nova's fingers dance across 3 keyboards simultaneously. But the timestamp is fresh. Someone's using dead satellites to hide active communications. Jax looks up from their corner workstation, purple hair catching the monitor glow. How fresh! 15 minutes ago. The warehouse falls silent except for the eternal hum of cooling fans. Professor Kale emerges from the makeshift lab in the back corner, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. At 58, he's the oldest member of their group, a disgraced virologist whose career ended when he asked too many questions about certain pandemic-era research protocols. "Did you crack it?" Kale asks, approaching with the careful steps of someone who's learned to expect bad news. Nova's screen fills with cascading code as her decryption algorithms chew through layers of obfuscation. Almost. There. The file materializes. Project Aegis 2030.enx. Aegis, Lynx mutters. That's not good. Aegis was a classified program I remember from my NSA days. Theoretical population management scenarios. Theoretical, Nova repeats, clicking open the file. Let's see how theoretical it still is. The document unfolds across her screen like a digital autopsy report. Code fragments, data tables, implementation timelines. Her eyes scan the contents, and her expression shifts from curiosity to confusion to something approaching horror. "Guys," she says, her voice dropping to a whisper, "this isn't about surveillance, this isn't about control." Jack spins their chair around. "What is it about?" Nova's hands tremble slightly as she highlights a section of code. Variables with names like fertility, reduction, vectors, genetic selection, protocols, and population ceiling enforcement. "It's about extinction," she breathes. "Mass vaccination campaigns, supply chain disruptions, climate-based selection zones." She reads directly from the screen. Phase implementation. Reduce global population to sustainable levels through coordinated biological and environmental interventions. Target timeline 2030. Acceptable retention rate 6 to 8% of current population. The silence stretches like a held breath. 6 to 8%, Kyle repeats slowly, of 7 billion people. "That's not population control," Link says, his intelligence training kicking in as he processes the implications. "That's genocide with a spreadsheet." Nova scrolls deeper into the document, her face pale in the monitor light. "There's more. Listen to this. This initiative represents a fundamental reset of the human species. Traditional methods of population management through war, famine, and disease have proven insufficient to address the accelerating resource depletion crisis. Project Aegis represents a coordinated approach to ensure species survival through selective reduction." "Species survival?" Jax echoes. "They're talking about us like we're livestock." "No," Nova corrects, her voice hollow. "Livestock are valuable. We're weeds they want to clear from the garden." Kale sits down heavily, his scientific mind wrestling with the implications. During his years researching virology, he'd seen enough classified projects to know that the line between theoretical and operational could be crossed with a single authorization signature. "We need to verify this," he says finally. "Cross-reference with known programs, trace the source, build a complete picture. If this is real," Nova finishes, "we're looking at the greatest crime in human history, and it's already begun." Lynx pulls up his contacts, a carefully maintained network of sources still embedded in various intelligence agencies. "I'll reach out to my people, see what chatter I can pick up. I'll dig into the technical specifications," Jax offers. "These code fragments reference specific biological agents. If they're using existing research, there'll be traces in academic databases." Nova saves the file to their secure server and begins setting up multiple backup protocols. "Professor, we need you to analyze the biological components. Your expertise might be the key to understanding how they plan to implement this." As the team disperses to their workstations, the weight of their discovery settles over the warehouse like digital smoke. They've stumbled across something that wasn't meant for human eyes, a blueprint for the end of the world as they know it. Outside, the city sleeps on, unaware that 4 people in a converted warehouse have just glimpsed the future, and it looks like a graveyard with Wi-Fi. Nova stares at the file name blinking on her screen, Project Aegis 2030.nc. In mythology, Aegis was the shield of Zeus, a divine protection for the gods. But protection for whom? And protection from what? As she begins her deep dive into the data, one phrase keeps echoing in her mind from the document's executive summary. This isn't about control, it's about resetting the species. The countdown, she realizes, isn't to some distant apocalypse. It's to tomorrow. 3 days of sleepless research have transformed their warehouse into a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Every wall now displays interconnected timelines, corporate hierarchies, and data flow charts that would make a forensic accountant weep. Nova hasn't left the building since they cracked the Aegis file, surviving on instant ramen and the kind of caffeine-fueled determination that borders on religious fervour. "I found the breadcrumbs," she announces, her voice hoarse from exhaustion, and chain-smoking cigarettes she bummed from Lynx. The World Population Summit in Cairo, 1994. Most people remember it as a boring UN conference about reproductive rights and sustainable development. She pulls up archived documents on the main display screen, official transcripts, media reports, diplomatic cables, standard bureaucratic theatre. But look what happens when you dig into the closed-door sessions. A classified document appears, heavily redacted but with enough visible text to tell a story. The header reads, "Adaptive Earth Framework, Preliminary Implementation Strategies." Cale adjusts his glasses, squinting at the screen. "I remember this conference. I was a graduate student then, writing my dissertation on population genetics. There were rumours about private sessions, but nobody talked about what was discussed," Nova finishes. "Except someone did. Deep in the diplomatic archives, buried under 17 layers of classification, I found this." She highlights passages that make the room's temperature seem to drop. Non-essential demographic drift must be addressed through coordinated intervention. Genetic dead zones present opportunity for selective resource allocation. Acceptable fallout parameters established at 85 to 90% reduction over 2-generation cycle. Project requires integration of medical, agricultural and environmental vectors. Jax looks up from their workstation, where they've been cross-referencing pharmaceutical patents. "Nova, you need to see this. Those medical vectors they mention. I've been tracking the patent filings, and there's a pattern." They throw their research onto the shared screen. Dozens of pharmaceutical patents filed between 2018 and 2023, all connected to a web of shell companies, all related to mRNA modification technology. "But here's the weird part," Jax continues. "These patents aren't just for vaccines. They're for genetic modification systems that can be activated remotely, dormant until triggered by specific environmental factors." Cale's face goes pale. That's not possible. The technology to create delayed activation genetic modifications didn't exist in 2018, Jax agrees, but it does now. And according to these patents, it's been deployed. Nova pulls up another document from their Aegis cache. "Remember, Professor, you mentioned seeing strange compounds in vaccine trials during the pandemic? Trials with non-public results?" Cale nods slowly. "There were inconsistencies. control groups that should have shown specific immune responses but didn't, novel proteins that had no apparent therapeutic function. When I raised concerns, you were discredited and forced out, Nova says. They called you a conspiracy theorist. Because I was asking the wrong questions, Kale realises. I was looking for immediate effects, but if these compounds were designed for delayed activation... Link slides his chair over, holding a printout of classified communications he's pulled from the old NSA databases. I've been digging through archived surveillance reports. Remember how during the pandemic, certain rural areas had unusually high vaccination rates, areas that normally resist federal health initiatives. He spreads out a map showing vaccination distribution patterns across the United States. Strange clusters appear in seemingly random locations. Rural counties in Montana, farming communities in Iowa, small towns along the Appalachian Trail. These aren't random, Nova says, studying the pattern. They're systematic. Someone was targeting specific populations. Or specific genetic profiles, Kale adds quietly. Jax's workstation chimes with an alert. Guys, I've been monitoring dark web chatter about unusual health trends. Look at this. They project a series of forum posts, social media reports, and medical anomalies from the past 6 months. Unexplained fertility drops in rural communities. Unusual autoimmune responses in adults aged 25 to 45. Regional variations in birth defects that don't match known environmental factors. Agricultural workers reporting mysterious illnesses that don't respond to standard treatments. Nova connects the dots on their shared display, drawing lines between vaccination sites, health anomalies, and demographic data. The pattern that emerges looks like a slow-motion biological weapon detonating across the landscape. They weren't just treating viruses, she says, echoing Kale's earlier words. They were treating the future human genome. Lynx pulls up another classified document, this one from a more recent surveillance operation. There's more. I found references to something called genetic compatibility mapping in Department of Homeland Security briefings. They've been collecting DNA samples through routine medical procedures and cross-referencing them with... He stops, staring at the screen. With what? Nova prompts. With survival probability models, he finishes. They're not just tracking who might survive their selective reduction. They're actively identifying who they want to eliminate. The warehouse falls silent as the implications settle over them like digital ash. They're not just looking at a conspiracy. They're looking at the implementation phase of humanity's final exam. And most of the class is about to fail. Kale stands up slowly, his scientific mind finally accepting what his moral instincts have been screaming. We need to understand the full scope. If they've weaponized the medical system, the agricultural system, the environmental monitoring system, then they've turned civilization itself into a weapon, Nova completes. As if summoned by their conversation, Jax's monitoring systems light up with alerts. Encrypted traffic spike on the satellite networks, same routing pattern as the original Aegis transmission. Nova rushes to her decryption station. They're talking again. If we can intercept this... The file downloads slowly, each percentage point feeling like an eternity. When it finally opens, it's not code this time. It's a video conference recording. Meeting minutes, Lynx realises, from yesterday. Nova's hand hovers over the play button. Once they watch this, there's no going back. No pretending they stumbled across theoretical documents or academic exercises. Whatever's on this recording, she says, it's going to show us who's behind this, and what comes next. She clicks play. The screen fills with faces they recognise from news broadcasts and magazine covers. World leaders, tech billionaires, pharmaceutical executives, and scientists, all sitting around a virtual conference table discussing the end of the world with the casual tone of a quarterly earnings call. And in the corner of the screen, a countdown timer. 18 months, 14 days, 7 hours, 23 minutes. The clock is ticking, and they're about to learn exactly what happens when it reaches 0. The video quality is surprisingly good for something intercepted from a rerouted satellite signal. Crystal clear audio, HD resolution, perfect lighting. Almost as if whoever recorded this wanted it to be found by someone with the right skills and motivation. Nova adjusts the audio levels as familiar faces fill the screen. She recognises at least half of them. Pharmaceutical CEOs who've been in the news, tech moguls who've testified before Congress, government officials whose names appear in leaked documents weekly. But it's the people she doesn't recognise that worry her more. Faces that suggest power operates in layers the public never sees. "Audio check," a voice says off-screen. "We're recording for the archive. All participants have been verified through biometric confirmation." "Proceed with briefing," responds a woman Nova recognises as the director of the World Health Organization. "Phase 3 implementation status." A man in his 60s, distinguished silver hair, appears in a separate window. The nameplate reads, "Doctor, Harrison Vale, Protean Core Industries." Nova makes a mental note. She's never heard of Protean Core, which means they've done excellent work staying invisible. "Phase 3 is proceeding on schedule," Dr. Vale reports. "Biometric surveillance systems are now operational in 847 rural zones across 17 countries. Heat mapping, fertility tracking, and genetic sequencing capabilities are running at full capacity." Jax pauses their other work to focus on the video. Genetic sequencing? That's not something you can do remotely. "Unless," Kale says slowly, "you've already collected samples through other means." On screen, Dr. Vale continues. "Integration with consumer health devices has exceeded projections. Voluntary data submission through fitness trackers, smartphones, and IoT medical devices now covers 73% of target demographics in developed nations." Nova feels her blood turn cold. She looks at the fitness tracker on her own wrist, a gift from her sister 2 Christmases ago. The little device that's been monitoring her heart rate, sleep patterns, stress levels. The device that connects to her phone, which connects to the cloud, which connects to... Smart device penetration in rural areas remains challenging, Dr. Vale continues, but our partnerships with agricultural technology companies have provided alternative collection methods. Genetic material harvested through routine veterinary procedures on livestock has proven surprisingly effective for human population mapping. "What the hell does that mean?" Jax whispers. Kale's face has gone ashen. "Cross-species genetic contamination. If they're introducing human genetic markers into livestock, then tracking the animal genetics. They can map human populations through the food chain," Nova finishes. "Every hamburger, every glass of milk, every piece of chicken carries genetic data." On screen, the meeting continues. A younger man, maybe 40, appears in a new window. His nameplate reads, "Marcus Chen, Global Agricultural Systems." Nova notices the shared surname but feels no family connection, only revulsion. "Agricultural vector deployment is exceeding expectations," Marcus reports. "mRNA modification systems are now integrated into feed supplies for cattle, poultry and swine across North America and Europe. Human consumption data indicates 94% population exposure through dietary intake." "Side effects?" asks the WHO director. "Minimal immediate impact as designed. However, fertility rates in test regions are down 23% year over year, with accelerating decline patterns. Autoimmune responses are appearing within expected parameters." Nova's hands shake as she realises what they're watching. These aren't plans being discussed. These are progress reports on operations already in motion. Lynx leans closer to the screen. "That voice. I know that voice." A new participant joins the call, their video window appearing in the centre of the screen. The image is deliberately obscured, shadows and lighting designed to hide identity, but the voice is clear and authoritative. "Psychological conditioning remains our most effective vector," the shadowed figure reports. "Media saturation campaigns have successfully normalised concepts of population reduction, climate-based selection, and voluntary extinction movements. Social media algorithms are amplifying despair, hopelessness, and antinatalist sentiment across target demographics." "Mental fatigue campaigns?" the WHO director asks. "Exceeding projections. Suicide rates in target age ranges are up 34% year over year. Birth rates continue declining as planned. Most importantly, resistance to authority has decreased significantly. Population compliance with future directives is expected to be near universal." Jack stands up abruptly, knocking over their chair. "They're not just poisoning our bodies, they're poisoning our minds." Nova pauses the video, needing a moment to process what they're witnessing. This isn't just biological warfare. It's psychological, social, environmental. They've weaponized everything we depend on to survive. Food, air, water, information, Lynx lists. They're not attacking civilization. They've turned civilization into the weapon. Cale sits down heavily, his scientific worldview crumbling and reforming around this new reality. The fertility decline, the autoimmune disorders, the psychological depression epidemics, it's all connected, it's all intentional. Nova resumes the video. The shadowed figure continues speaking. Phase 4. Preparation is nearly complete. Environmental triggers are in position. When activated, they will catalyze the biological modifications already present in target populations. Estimated timeline for full effect 18 months. The WHO director nods. Excellent. What about resistance potential? Minimal. Independent researchers who've approached relevant discoveries have been discredited, defunded, or eliminated from academic and professional positions. Media coverage of related topics has been successfully redirected toward established conspiracy theory frameworks, ensuring any accurate information is dismissed as paranoid delusion. Nova feels the walls of their warehouse closing in. How many others have found pieces of this puzzle? How many have been silenced? Dr. Vale, the shadowed figure continues. Status report on asset protection. Dr. Vale reappears on screen. Protection protocols are operational. All essential personnel and their families have received modified treatments. Genetic compatibility with post-implementation environment is confirmed. We estimate a protected population of approximately 500,000 globally. 500,000, Jax repeats numbly, out of 7 billion. The video quality starts to degrade as the satellite connection becomes unstable. But one final exchange comes through clearly. Any concerns about detection? Unlikely. The full scope of the operation requires integration of data from medical, agricultural, environmental, technological and psychological sources. No single research team or intelligence agency has access to all vectors simultaneously. Except, the WHO director adds with something approaching dark humour, they would need to be simultaneously expert in cryptography, intelligence gathering, virology, social engineering, and information systems. The shadowed figure laughs. The probability of such a team existing with access to the right data and the motivation to pursue it is essentially zero. The connection dies, leaving their warehouse in silence. Nova, Lynx, Jax, and Kael look at each other across the digital evidence of humanity's planned extinction. Well, Nova says finally, I guess we're essentially zero. But as the four of them return to their workstations, preparing to dive deeper into the nightmare they've uncovered, none of them notice the small indicator light on Jax's communication system. The light that shows someone has been monitoring their network traffic. The light that means their essentially zero probability team has just become a confirmed threat. The light that means Phase 4 might be starting ahead of schedule. The warehouse's early warning system starts screaming at 4:17 a.m, 3 hours after they finished analysing the intercepted conference call. Nova jolts awake from her desk, where she'd fallen asleep reviewing genetic modification patents. The screens around her flash red as multiple intrusion detection systems trigger simultaneously. "Lynx!" she shouts, adrenaline cutting through exhaustion. "We've got company!" Lynx rolls out of his sleeping bag, grabbing his laptop and a go bag he keeps permanently packed, old habits from his intelligence days. "What kind of company?" "The kind that uses military-grade network penetration tools," Nova responds, her fingers flying across keyboards as she tries to lock down their systems. "Someone's been watching us." Jax appears from the back room, purple hair messy from sleep but their eyes sharp with focus. "How long have they been in our network?" "Unknown," Nova admits, fighting a losing battle against the intrusion. "But they've got root access to our communication systems. They've seen everything." Cale emerges from his makeshift lab, clutching a hard drive. "I've backed up all the biological data to an isolated system. If we lose the main servers..." "We're losing everything," Nova confirms, watching as file after file disappears from their local storage. They're not just infiltrating, they're sanitizing, removing all traces of what we've found. But even as their digital fortress crumbles around them, Nova's mind races ahead to their backup protocols. Years of paranoia have taught her to prepare for exactly this scenario. "Jax, activate the mesh network. Lynx, get the satellite uplink ready. We're going distributed." The warehouse transforms as hidden systems come online. What appeared to be a simple hacker den reveals itself as a sophisticated intelligence operation. Jax's workstation unfolds into a multi-array communication hub. Lynx produces equipment that definitely didn't come from civilian sources. Nova's desk reveals hidden servers and backup power systems. "Professor," Nova calls, "how much of your research is stored offline?" "Everything critical," Kale confirms. "I learned not to trust cloud storage after they destroyed my academic career." As their attackers continue dismantling their main systems, the team executes an evacuation protocol they've rehearsed, but hoped never to use. Critical files transfer to multiple secure locations. Communication channels shift to encrypted networks. Physical evidence gets packed into go bags. But Nova isn't running yet. Instead, she's doing something that would seem insane to anyone who doesn't understand her particular brand of digital warfare. She's tracing the intrusion back to its source. "What are you doing?" Lynx demands, watching her work as alarms continue screaming around them. "If they're watching us," Nova says through gritted teeth, "then we're watching them back." Her screen fills with a network traffic analysis, packet traces, and routing information. The attack is sophisticated, routed through multiple proxy servers and anonymization networks. But sophistication creates complexity, and complexity creates vulnerabilities. "There," she breathes, highlighting a data stream. "They're not just stealing our files, they're uploading something." The upload completes just as Nova isolates the data stream, a single file placed carefully in their system logs where it would be discovered during any forensic analysis. Child pornography, Lynx realizes, reading the file metadata. They're setting us up when law enforcement finds this place. "We'll be dismissed as perverts and criminals instead of researchers," Nova finishes. "Brilliant. Completely discredit us while making sure no one looks too closely at what we actually found." But Nova's trace has revealed something else, the real location of their attackers, and it's not some anonymous hacker collective or foreign government. "They're operating out of the Protean Core building," she announces. "Dr. Harrison Vale's company. The same people we watched discussing humanity's extinction 3 hours ago." Jax finishes packing their equipment. "We need to leave, now." But Nova is still working, her fingers moving with the desperate speed of someone who knows this might be their last chance. Not yet. If they're monitoring us in real time, if they know what we've discovered, then they know we're a threat, which means... Her screen fills with a new data stream. Not an attack this time, but intercepted communications from the Protean Core building. They're having an emergency meeting, she realizes, right now, about us. She patches the audio through their speakers, and suddenly the warehouse fills with voices they recognize from the earlier recording. "Confirmed they have the Phase 3 documentation," Dr. Vale's voice reports. "Full technical specifications, implementation timelines, biological modification protocols." "How is that possible?" The WHO director's voice sounds strained. "That information is compartmentalized across 17 different security classifications. Unknown, but their research capabilities suggest state-level intelligence resources. We may have a coordinated opposition." A new voice joins the call, the shadowed figure from the earlier recording, though now speaking with urgent authority rather than calm confidence. "Irrelevant. They know enough to compromise the entire operation if they go public. We need immediate containment." "What kind of containment?" Dr. Vale asks. "Total. The team, their research, their facility. Make it look like a lab accident. Chemical fire, explosion, whatever ensures complete evidence destruction." Nova's blood turns to ice as she realizes what they're planning. "How long do we have?" the WHO director asks. "Tactical team is en route, 20 minutes. Nova starts shutting down systems, her movements sharp with controlled panic. "We're blown. They're sending a kill team." 20 minutes? Jax checks their watch. "That's not enough time to..." "It's enough time to do one thing," Nova interrupts, pulling up her final contingency protocol. "We can't save ourselves, but we can save the evidence." She begins uploading their complete research archive to a decentralized network. Blockchain-based storage systems that can't be deleted or controlled by any single authority. But the upload is massive, and their internet connection is already compromised. "Upload time, 17 minutes, her system reports. 3 minutes to spare, Lynx says grimly, checking his weapons, if their timeline is accurate. But as if summoned by his words, new alarms start screaming. Motion sensors around the warehouse perimeter. Thermal imaging detecting multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. They lied about the timeline, Nova realizes. The team is already here. Through the grimy windows, they can see black SUVs surrounding the building. Tactical lights sweep across the walls. Radio chatter echoes from outside, professional, coordinated, lethal. Upload progress, 32%, her computer announces. Nova looks at her team, her friends, her fellow travellers in the digital underground. Jax with their fierce intelligence and boundless optimism. Lynx with his warrior's honour and protective instincts. Kale with his scientist's dedication to truth above comfort. "I need 8 more minutes to finish the upload," she says quietly. "Can you give me 8 minutes? Lynx checks his rifle, the same model he carried during his government service. Against a professional tactical team? In an indefensible position? He looks around the warehouse, their home, their sanctuary, their last stand. "Yeah," he says finally, "we can give you 8 minutes. As the first breaching charges explode against the warehouse doors, Nova's fingers continue dancing across her keyboard, uploading humanity's final testimony to the digital wind. Outside, boots pound against concrete and orders are shouted in tactical shorthand. Inside, 4 people who stumbled across the end of the world fight to make sure someone, somewhere, will know what really happened to the human race. The upload bar crawls toward completion, 47%, 48%, Sasipgu Peosentu, and in the distance sirens wail, though whether they're coming to help or to clean up the mess, nobody can tell. Upload progress, 73%. Nova's fingers move across the keyboard with mechanical precision, even as automatic weapons fire tears through the warehouse's steel walls. Lynx and Jax have improvised a defensive position behind stacked servers, returning fire with the small arsenal Lynx maintained for exactly this scenario. Kyle crouches beside Nova, clutching his backup drives like sacred relics. "How much longer?" Lynx shouts over the gunfire, ejecting an empty magazine. 3 minutes, Nova responds, sweat dripping onto her keyboard as she maintains the upload connection, despite power fluctuations from damaged systems. A tactical team member appears at a broken window. Jax takes him down with a shot that would make their grandfather proud. The same grandfather who taught them to shoot cans off fence posts in rural Oregon, never imagining his lessons would one day be used to defend the future of human civilization. Upload progress, 81%. "Nova!" Kale shouts, pointing at the main screen. "They're jamming our satellite connection." She looks up to see their upload speed dropping rapidly. The decentralized network storage is failing as targeted electromagnetic pulses disrupt their communication arrays. Years of preparation, layers of redundancy, multiple backup systems, all being systematically neutralized by an enemy who understands their capabilities better than they understand themselves. "Switch to the hard line," she orders, pulling cables from emergency ports hidden beneath the floor. "If the satellites are down, we go terrestrial." But even as she reroutes their connection through buried fibre optic cables, her screens show the truth. Their attackers aren't just soldiers. They're technicians, equipped with signal intelligence gear and digital warfare tools. This isn't a military assault, it's a surgical data extraction and elimination operation. Upload progress, 89%. They're inside the network, Nova realizes, watching as files begin corrupting during transfer. They're not jamming the connection, they're poisoning it. Malicious code floods through their internet connection, targeting not just their local systems, but the destination servers themselves. Wherever they try to upload their evidence, the same destructive algorithms follow, erasing data as fast as they can transmit it. 90 seconds, Lynx reports, reloading his rifle. "That's all I can give you." Nova's mind races through alternatives. Local storage, compromised. Cloud servers, compromised. Peer-to-peer networks, compromised. Everywhere they turn, the digital tentacles of their enemies have already reached. But there's one option they haven't tried. One network that exists outside the normal channels of internet communication. "Jax!" she shouts. "Emergency radio protocols. Can you reach the ham radio networks?" Jax nods, understanding immediately. While their enemies have prepared for digital warfare, they might not have anticipated analog communication methods, ancient radio technology that predates the internet by decades. As Jax frantically assembles radio equipment, Nova begins compressing their data files into formats suitable for audio transmission. Everything they've discovered about Project Aegis, the population reduction protocols, the biological modification systems, compressed into digital packets that can be transmitted over shortwave radio frequencies. Upload progress, 94%, transmission corrupted. Their internet connection dies completely as electromagnetic pulse weapons finish destroying their communication arrays. but Jax's radio equipment sparks to life, connecting them to a network of amateur radio operators who maintain communication protocols independent of corporate or government control. "This is Emergency Station Alpha calling CQ Emergency," Jax broadcasts. "We have critical data for immediate relay to all stations. Repeat, critical data for immediate relay." Responses crackle back from radio operators across the country, retired engineers, electronics hobbyists, disaster relief volunteers, people who maintain the last truly free communication network on the planet. Nova begins transmitting their compressed data files, sending fragments to different radio operators with instructions for reassembly and distribution. It's slow, inefficient and incomplete, but it's working. Until the lights go out. Emergency power kicks in, bathing the warehouse in red light as their main electrical systems fail. Through the broken windows they can see technicians working on power lines, systematically isolating the building from the electrical grid. "They're cutting everything," Kale observes. "Power, internet, radio frequency spectrum, complete communication isolation." Nova's laptop switched to battery power, giving her perhaps 10 minutes of operation before total system failure. She continues transmitting data packets over Jax's radio equipment, but the process is agonizingly slow. "Nova!" Lynx calls urgently. "Movement on the roof. They're coming through the skylights." She looks up to see tactical team members rappelling through the warehouse's ceiling. Professional, coordinated, equipped with night vision and thermal imaging. In 30 seconds, they'll have complete control of the space. In 30 seconds, Project Aegis will remain humanity's best-kept secret. But Nova has one final option. One last desperate gambit that violates every principle of operational security she's ever followed. She activates her personal phone's livestream function and begins broadcasting directly to social media. "My name is Nova Chen," she says, looking directly into the camera as gunfire echoes around her. "If you're watching this, you need to know that the world's governments and corporations are planning to kill most of the human race." Her phone screen shows viewer counts climbing rapidly. Hundreds, then thousands of people drawn by the chaos and violence of her livestream. They call it Project Aegis, population reduction through biological modification. They've poisoned the vaccines, contaminated the food supply, weaponized the environmental monitoring systems. Tactical team members breach their defensive position. Lynx falls, blood spreading across the concrete floor. Jax continues working the radio, transmitting data even as red laser sights dance across their chest. "The timeline is 18 months, Nova continues, holding the phone steady despite the chaos. "They've already begun implementation. If you've been vaccinated, if you eat processed food, if you use smart devices, you're already carrying the biological modifications they need to." A tactical team member's rifle butt smashes into her skull, sending the phone spinning across the concrete floor. The livestream continues, showing a sideways view of combat boots and spreading pools of blood, but the damage is done. In the 3 minutes her stream was active, over 50,000 people watched Nova Chen's final testimony. And in the age of social media, 50,000 becomes 5 million in a matter of hours. The last thing her phone's camera captures before the screen goes black is a gloved hand reaching down to pick it up. In the background, a voice speaks with calm authority. "Sanitize everything. No evidence, no witnesses, no trace this facility ever existed." Then static, then silence, then nothing. 6 months later. The official report from the Woodland Fire Department described it as a tragic industrial accident. Improper storage of chemical solvents in a converted warehouse led to an explosion that killed 4 squatters and destroyed the building completely. Local news covered it for exactly 1 day before moving on to more compelling stories. The livestream that briefly appeared on various social media platforms was quickly removed for violating community guidelines against violent content and misinformation. Users who tried to share or discuss it found their accounts suspended or shadow banned. Within a week it had been scrubbed from mainstream platforms entirely. But the internet remembers everything, especially the things someone desperately wants forgotten. On encrypted message boards and dark web forums, fragments of Nova's final broadcast circulate like digital samizdat. Grainy screenshots, audio clips, transcribed quotes passed from user to user through carefully maintained networks of paranoid technologists and dedicated conspiracy researchers. Truth Seeker 2030 posts on an anonymous forum. "Anyone else remember that warehouse livestream from 6 months ago? The girl talking about Project Aegis. Can't find it anywhere now, but I swear I downloaded a copy. Digital Ghost responds. Had the same video. File corrupted when I tried to open it last week. All my Aegis research just disappeared, like it was never there. Red Pill Reality chimes in. Same here. But I remember what she said. Population reduction, biological modifications, food supply contamination, 18 months. We're down to 12 months now. The conversations multiply across platforms that exist in the shadows of the normal internet. Ham radio operators share fragments of the data Jax transmitted in those final minutes. Academic researchers quietly compare notes about unusual patterns in pharmaceutical trials and agricultural modifications. Environmental scientists notice anomalies that match the warnings from a warehouse that officially never existed. Dr. Sarah Martinez, epidemiologist at UC Davis, publishes a paper about unexplained fertility decline in rural agricultural communities. She doesn't mention Project Aegis directly, but her data matches the patterns Nova's team identified with unsettling accuracy. Professor David Kim at MIT releases research about novel proteins found in certain vaccine batches, proteins with no apparent therapeutic function. His funding gets cut 3 weeks later, and his department chair suggests he focus on less controversial research topics. Environmental journalist Lisa Chen, no relation to Nova despite the shared surname, investigates reports of unusual biometric surveillance equipment appearing in remote areas. Her article gets killed by her editor, who explains that the magazine's parent company has concerns about unfounded conspiracy theories. But each cancelled publication, each suppressed research project, each deleted social media post creates a new data point in a pattern that becomes hard to ignore. The truth spreads like a virus through the digital underground. 12 months later, Maya Patel is 17 years old and has never heard of Nova Chen, Lynx Rodriguez, Jax Morrison, or Professor Kale. She lives in a small village in rural India, where internet access is limited, and social media is considered a luxury for urban elites. But Maya is smart, curious, and has access to her school's computer lab 3 days a week. She spends her time learning about environmental science, genetic engineering, and the intersection of technology and biology. Her dream is to study at a Western university and help solve the world's agricultural challenges. It's during one of these computer lab sessions that she finds the flash drive. Buried in a box of discarded electronics donated to the school, wrapped in plastic and electrical tape like someone tried very hard to preserve it. The label, written in faded ink, reads, Population Zero Proof.Vault. Maya plugs it into the computer, expecting maybe some students' old homework or family photos. Instead, she finds 847 gigabytes of encrypted data files, research documents, intercepted communications, and video recordings. She finds genetic modification protocols, pharmaceutical patents, agricultural contamination systems, and psychological warfare strategies. She finds the complete archive of everything Nova Chen's team discovered about Project Aegis. The encryption is military grade, but Maya is patient and clever. She spends 3 weeks cracking the access codes, working during lunch breaks and staying after school until the janitor kicks her out. When she finally opens the files, she spends another week just trying to understand what she's looking at. Population reduction through coordinated biological intervention. Genetic modification systems activated by environmental triggers. Food chain contamination designed to cause sterility and immune system failure. Psychological warfare campaigns to normalize extinction and reduce resistance to authority. A timeline that originally targeted 2030, but has been accelerated to 2027. Maya realizes she's looking at the blueprint for humanity's planned extinction, and according to the timestamps on the most recent files, the final phase is scheduled to begin in 6 months. She copies everything to multiple storage devices and begins the careful process of verification, cross-referencing patent filings, pharmaceutical research, agricultural modifications, environmental monitoring data. Every piece of evidence Nova's team gathered, Maya confirms through independent research. It's all true, it's all happening, and almost nobody knows. But Maya Patel is 17 years old, raised in a culture that reveres education and truth-telling above personal safety. She doesn't consider keeping the information secret. She doesn't wonder if she might be wrong. She doesn't worry about the consequences of speaking truth to power. She uploads everything to every platform she can access. WikiLeaks, anonymous file-sharing networks, academic databases, social media platforms, government transparency websites, journalist tip lines, activist organisations, environmental groups, medical research communities. She translates key documents into 17 languages and distributes them through international networks. She creates simplified summaries for non-technical audiences and detailed analyses for subject matter experts. She floods the internet with the truth about Project Aegis, and this time it's too late to stop the signal. Within hours, Maya's uploads are being downloaded thousands of times. Within days, the downloads become millions. Major news outlets pick up the story. Government officials demand investigations. International health organisations call emergency sessions. The carefully orchestrated plan to reduce human population through biological warfare becomes the most documented conspiracy in human history. Dr. Harrison Vale attempts to discredit the documents as sophisticated forgeries. The WHO director claims the communications were taken out of context. Government officials deny any knowledge of population reduction protocols. But the evidence is overwhelming, the documentation is comprehensive, and the verification is independent. Too many researchers, in too many countries, using too many different methodologies, all reach the same conclusion. Project Aegis is real, it's operational, and it's working. Global fertility rates have dropped 34% over the past 3 years. Autoimmune disorders have increased 78% in demographics that received certain vaccine formulations. Agricultural workers in modified crop regions show genetic markers consistent with engineered biological agents. Psychological depression and suicide rates have reached historic highs in precisely the age groups targeted by media manipulation campaigns. The population reduction protocol isn't a future threat. It's already killed millions of people. 18 months after the warehouse, Maya Patel stands before the International Criminal Court in The Hague, testifying about the greatest crime in human history. Behind her sits a display showing population statistics, fertility decline curves, mortality data, and genetic modification evidence. She holds up a small flash drive, the same one she found in a box of discarded electronics in her school's computer lab. This device, she tells the court, contains the complete records of Project Aegis, compiled by 4 researchers who died trying to warn the world about what was being done to us. She sets the drive on the witness stand. Nova Chen was 26 years old when she was murdered for discovering that our governments and corporations had poisoned the human race. Lynx Rodriguez was 32 when he died, defending her right to tell the truth. Jax Morrison was 21 when they gave their life to upload this evidence to radio networks around the world. Professor Kale was 58 when he was killed for asking the wrong questions about biological modification research. Maya looks directly at the defendants, pharmaceutical executives, government officials, and corporate leaders who sit in chains behind bulletproof glass. They died so that we could live. They died so that humanity would know what was done to us. They died so that the people responsible for the greatest genocide in history would be held accountable. She picks up the flash drive again. Their names were Nova, Lynx, Jax, and Kyle. They saved our species, and they want you to remember that the truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the people who want to hide it. The courtroom falls silent as Maya's testimony ends. In the gallery, family members of victims weep quietly. In the press section, journalists furiously type stories that will reach billions of readers within hours, and in a small village in rural India, a 17-year-old girl's computer science teacher watches the live broadcast and smiles proudly at his former student. Sometimes the truth finds a way. Sometimes the good guys win. Sometimes 4 people in a warehouse can save the world, even after they're gone. Epilogue. The network remembers, 5 years later, the Maya Patel Institute for Digital Truth and Transparency occupies a gleaming building in New Geneva, funded by reparations payments from the corporations responsible for Project Aegis. Its mission statement, carved in stone above the entrance, reads, "The network remembers everything, especially the things someone desperately wants forgotten." In the lobby, 4 portraits hang side by side. Nova Chen, cryptographer and digital warrior; Lynx Rodriguez, intelligence analyst and protector; Jax Morrison, social engineer and technological prodigy; Professor Kyle, virologist and truth-teller. Beneath their portraits, a simple inscription: "They found the code that wasn't meant to be found." Tourists and students pass by the portraits daily. most not knowing the full story of how 4 people in a converted warehouse prevented the extinction of human civilization. But the staff of the Institute know, the researchers working on digital rights and technological transparency know, the activists fighting against corporate surveillance and biological manipulation know. And late at night, when the building is empty and the servers hum quietly in climate-controlled rooms, network traffic monitors occasionally detect unusual patterns in the data streams. Fragments of code that shouldn't exist, routed through pathways that don't appear on any network topology. Some say it's just background noise, artifacts of old systems and deprecated protocols. Others believe it's something more, digital ghosts of 4 researchers who refuse to let death stop their work, still uploading, still broadcasting, still fighting to keep the truth alive in the spaces between the data. The network remembers everything, and sometimes, late at night in the digital underground, the network remembers back. Tonight we're venturing into the heart of European scientific achievement, CERN, the European Organisation for Nuclear Research. But this isn't a story about breakthrough discoveries or Nobel Prize winners. This is about what happens when the pursuit of knowledge becomes something darker, when the tools of science are turned toward purposes that would make even the most hardened conspiracy theorists question their sanity. What I'm about to share with you is presented as fiction, but I want you to consider, as you listen, how much of what you'll hear could be true, how much of it might already be happening right now beneath the peaceful Swiss countryside. The following account was allegedly found in a waterlogged journal near the shores of Lake Geneva in early 2018. The journal belonged to Dr. Lydia Voss, a theoretical physicist who vanished without a trace in November 2017. Her disappearance made local news for exactly 3 days before the story was quietly buried. The journal's pages were filled with increasingly erratic handwriting, scientific equations that make no sense to conventional physics, and symbols that appear to predate written language. This is her story. This is what she claimed to have discovered beneath CERN, and this is why she disappeared. September 15th, 2016. My name is Dr. Lydia Voss, and I need to record this while I still can. While I still remember what normal feels like. I've been a physicist for 12 years, earned my doctorate at Cambridge studying quantum mechanics and multiverse theory. I thought I understood the universe, or at least I understood how little we actually understand about it. That humility, that acceptance of the unknown was supposed to be my strength. Instead, it became the door through which something unspeakable entered my life. I was recruited to CERN in early 2016, initially assigned to the ALICE experiment within the Large Hadron Collider. Standard work, analysing collision data, looking for exotic particles, the usual hunt for the building blocks of reality. It was everything I dreamed of as a graduate student, the chance to peer into the fundamental structure of existence itself. The LHC had been restarted after its upgrade, and we were pushing energies higher than ever before. The Higgs boson discovery in 2012 had opened new frontiers, but what we were seeing in 2016 went beyond anything the standard model could explain. Particles that shouldn't exist, energy signatures that defied conservation laws, patterns in the data that almost looked intentional. That's when I was transferred to Project Janus. The transfer came without warning. I arrived at my usual workstation one morning to find Dr. Heinrich Volker waiting for me, flanked by 2 security personnel I'd never seen before. Volker was old-school CERN. He'd been there since the 1980s, a man who'd witnessed the birth of the modern understanding of particle physics. His presence commanded respect, but there was something else in his eyes that morning. Something that might have been fear. "Dr. Voss," he said, his German accent thick with urgency. "You've been selected for a special assignment. Your expertise in multiverse theory has brought you to our attention." I remember feeling honoured. Project Janus was rumoured to be CERN's most classified research division, working on theoretical frameworks that went beyond even the most advanced quantum mechanics. To be chosen for such work was the dream of every physicist. I should have recognised it as the beginning of a nightmare. The Janus facility was located in what the maps called Subsector Gamma, accessible only through a series of security checkpoints that descended far below the main collider ring. The elevator ride down took nearly 8 minutes, much deeper than any official CERN schematic showed. The walls changed as we descended, from the familiar concrete and steel of the upper levels to something that looked almost organic, with strange geometric patterns carved into the stone. "How deep are we going?" I asked Dr. Volker. "Deep enough," was his only response. The Janus lab was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Instead of the sterile white walls typical of research facilities, the space was dimly lit by red ambient lighting that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Banks of quantum computers hummed along the perimeter, their processing power dedicated to simulations that required computational resources I couldn't even calculate. But it was the central display that captured my attention. A three-dimensional holographic projection showed what appeared to be a cross-section of space-time itself, with layers of reality stacked like transparent sheets, and running through each layer, like a needle through fabric, was a brilliant line of energy. "What am I looking at?" I whispered. Dr. Volker approached the display, his face bathed in the ethereal glow. "The Higgs field, Doctor." "Voss. But not as we understand it. This is what we've discovered since the high-energy collisions began. The field isn't uniform. It has architecture." He manipulated the display, zooming in on one section where the field seemed to ripple and bend around invisible structures. We initially thought these were computational artifacts, errors in our simulation. But the patterns repeat across every collision event. They're consistent, predictable, and they respond to our experiments. Respond how? Watch. Volker activated what he called a field perturbation, essentially a virtual recreation of a high-energy collision within the simulation. As the particles collided, the Higgs field didn't just create mass as expected, it created geometric patterns, crystalline structures that seemed to serve as conduits for something else. "The neutrino deviation patterns," I breathed, recognizing the data signatures. "They're not random. They're being influenced by these structures." "Precisely. And Dr. Voss, we need to understand what's doing the influencing." That night I went home to my small apartment in Meyrin and tried to process what I'd seen. The coffee grew cold as I sat at my kitchen table, sketching the patterns I'd observed and trying to make sense of their implications. The Higgs field was supposed to be responsible for giving particles mass, but what we'd discovered suggested it might be something far more complex, a substrate through which other forces, other intelligences might operate. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I found myself researching historical accounts of strange phenomena associated with CERN. Most of it was conspiracy theory nonsense, the usual claims about opening portals to hell or summoning demons. But buried among the ridiculous theories were some unsettling facts. The location of CERN, for instance. The facility was built on the site of an ancient Roman temple dedicated to Apollo, and local folklore spoke of the area as a gateway to the underworld. The organisation's logo featured the number 666 in its design, officially a coincidence, but troubling nonetheless. And there was the Shiva statue, the bronze figure of the Hindu god of destruction placed prominently in the courtyard, dancing eternally above the particle accelerator. But it was a video I found on an obscure forum that truly disturbed me. Dated from 2016, it showed what appeared to be a mock ritual taking place at night near the Shiva statue. Figures in dark robes performed some kind of ceremony while others watched and filmed. The video was grainy, clearly shot from a distance, but something about it felt deeply wrong. The next morning, I brought up the video with Dr. Volker. He laughed it off, explaining that CERN staff occasionally performed pranks to feed the conspiracy theorists who monitored the facility. "Scientists have a sense of humour too, Doctor. Voss," he said. "We're not all serious all the time." But I'd studied that video frame by frame, and I was certain I'd recognise two of the figures. Dr. Volker himself was one of them. The other was Dr. Sarah Chen, the project coordinator who'd welcomed me to Janus. When I mentioned this doctor, Volker's expression changed. The casual dismissal vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Dr. Voss," he said carefully, "I think you might be spending too much time on conspiracy websites. Such distractions aren't healthy for a scientist of your calibre." But I could see it in his eyes. He remembered being there, and he knew that I knew. That afternoon, I was assigned to work with Dr. Matteo Greaves, a brilliant researcher who specialised in quantum field theory. Matteo was younger than me, maybe 28, with a kind of passionate intensity that made him perfect for theoretical work. He'd been with Project Janus for 6 months and had already uncovered patterns in the data that defied conventional explanation. The mathematics are wrong, he told me during our first collaboration session, or rather our mathematics are wrong. What we're seeing suggests that the fundamental constants we've built our understanding on are just approximations. Matteo showed me data streams from the deepest layers of the simulation, where the Higgs field interactions created patterns that resembled circuit boards or neural networks. It's as if the universe has an underlying architecture that's been hidden from us, and every time we collide particles at high energy, we're not just creating new particles, we're illuminating this hidden structure. What kind of structure? That's the question, isn't it? But Lydia, I think we need to consider the possibility that consciousness itself might be a fundamental force of physics, that what we're seeing isn't just matter and energy, but something that can think, plan, and respond. The implications were staggering. If consciousness was embedded in the fabric of space-time itself, then high-energy collisions weren't just revealing new particles, they were potentially making contact with forms of intelligence that operated on quantum scales. Matteo, I said, what if we're not just observing these patterns? What if we're communicating with them? He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's what I've been wondering too. And Lydia, I think they're trying to communicate back. October 3rd, 2016. I've been trying to find that video again, the one showing the ritual near the Shiva statue. It's been scrubbed from every site where I originally found it, but I managed to save a local copy before it disappeared. Studying it frame by frame has revealed details that make my stomach turn. The ritual took place on the night of August 14th, 2016, at exactly 11:47 p.m. I know this because I cross-referenced the timestamp with CERN's operational logs. August 14th was the night of an unscheduled technical maintenance shutdown of the LHC. The collision data from that evening shows a massive energy spike at 11:43 p.m, followed by an immediate system shutdown that lasted 3 hours. 4 minutes. 4 minutes between the energy spike and the ritual. The figures in the video are performing what appears to be a summoning circle around the base of the Shiva statue. There are 13 participants, all wearing identical dark robes, but 2 of them remove their hoods during the ceremony. Dr. Volker is clearly visible, as is Dr. Chen. A third figure who I believe might be Dr. Marcus Webb from the Theoretical Physics Department is holding what looks like a leather-bound book. But it's the fourth figure that disturbs me most. This person never removes their hood, but their body language is wrong. They move with a fluid, almost serpentine grace that seems to defy human anatomy. When they raise their arms, the gesture is perfectly synchronized with the others, but there's something in the way they hold themselves that suggests they're not entirely human. The audio is mostly wind and static, but I've run it through enhancement software and found fragments of what might be chanting. The words are in no language I recognise, but they follow rhythmic patterns that remind me of the quantum interference signatures we've been seeing in the Janus data. I've been watching this video obsessively, and I'm starting to notice details that shouldn't be possible. The shadows cast by the participants don't match the lighting in the scene. The statue itself seems to be moving slightly, as if the bronze figure is breathing, and in the background, just at the edge of the frame, there are lights beneath the ground, red lights that pulse in rhythm with the chanting. The same red lights that illuminate the Janus facility. I brought this up with Matteo yesterday, showing him the video during our lunch break. His face went pale as he watched the ceremony unfold. "Jesus Christ, Lydia," he whispered. "Where did you get this? Does it matter? The question is, what the hell are they doing?" Matteo was quiet for a long time, studying the figures in the video. "I think," he said finally, "they're trying to establish a connection. Look at the positioning. They're arranged in a perfect circle, 13 points equally spaced. That's not random. It's a geometric pattern designed to create resonance." Resonance with what? With whatever's responding to our experiments. "Lydia, I've been running calculations on the quantum field fluctuations we've been observing. The patterns aren't just intelligent, they're trying to break through from somewhere else, and I think this ritual is meant to help them." That night I stayed late in the Janus facility, ostensibly to work on data analysis, but really to look for evidence of the ritual's connection to our research. The facility was nearly empty, just a skeleton night crew monitoring the automated systems. The red lighting seemed more intense than usual, casting long shadows that moved independently of their sources. I accessed the historical data archives, looking for any anomalies that might correlate with the ritual's timing. What I found made my blood run cold. The energy spike on August 14th wasn't just a random fluctuation. It was a controlled experiment, one that had been planned and executed with surgical precision. The collision energies had been focused on a specific sector of the LHC ring, the sector directly beneath the Shiva statue. But more disturbing was what happened in the minutes following the ritual. The quantum field monitors throughout the facility had detected what the automated systems classified as exotic matter signatures, particles that existed for mere nanoseconds but left traces in the field that persisted for hours. And these traces formed patterns identical to the interference signatures we'd been studying in the Janus project. I was so absorbed in the data that I didn't notice the facility's lights dimming until it was too late. The red ambient lighting was slowly fading, replaced by something that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, and in that strange illumination I could see that I was no longer alone in the facility. There were figures standing in the shadows at the edges of the room, motionless but somehow alive. They wore the same dark robes as the participants in the ritual video, but their faces were hidden by hoods that seemed to absorb a light rather than simply blocking it. I tried to move, to call out, but found myself paralysed by a terror so complete that it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. One of the figures stepped forward, and I could see that what I had taken for a face beneath the hood was actually empty space. Not darkness, but a genuine absence of matter, as if reality itself had been carved away. The figure spoke, but not through any vocal mechanism I could understand. The words formed directly in my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. The threshold weakens, the pattern becomes clear. Soon, the collision. I must have lost consciousness because the next thing I remember is waking up at my desk with morning light streaming through the facility's windows. The normal white fluorescent lighting had returned, and the banks of computers hummed with their usual efficiency. My colleagues were arriving for the day shift, chatting about weekend plans and upcoming conferences. But on my computer screen was a message that hadn't been there the night before. The Shiva statue stands directly above Subsector Theta. Ask yourself why. I spent the rest of that day researching the facility's construction history, looking for any mention of Subsector Theta. The official blueprint showed no such designation, but buried in the archived engineering reports from the 1980s, I found references to deep excavation complications and unexpected subterranean structures discovered during the initial construction phase. According to one report, the construction team had encountered a natural cave system approximately 1.4 kilometres below the surface, directly beneath what would eventually become the location of the Shiva statue. The caves were sealed with concrete and steel, but the report noted unusual electromagnetic properties and persistent low-frequency vibrations that made workers uncomfortable. The construction was completed ahead of schedule, and the cave system was never mentioned in any subsequent documentation. That evening I met Matteo at a small cafe in Geneva, away from CERN's listening ears. I showed him the message on my computer and the construction reports I'd discovered. "Lydia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think we need to consider the possibility that CERN wasn't built to study particle physics. I think it was built to access something that was already here." "What do you mean?" "The location, the depth, the specific geometric arrangement of the Clyder ring. None of it makes sense from a purely scientific perspective. There are dozens of locations around the world that would have been better choices for a particle accelerator. But this specific spot, this exact location, was chosen for reasons that go beyond conventional physics." Matteo pulled out a notebook filled with equations and diagrams. "I've been working on this for weeks, trying to understand the mathematical relationships between the collision energies and the quantum field responses. The patterns aren't random, Lydia. They're following rules, but not the rules of our physics. It's as if we're communicating with a form of intelligence that operates according to completely different physical laws. And you think this intelligence is located in the cave system beneath the facility? I think the cave system is a focal point, a place where the barrier between our reality and theirs is naturally thin, and I think the LHC is being used to weaken that barrier even further." As we spoke, I noticed that other patrons of the cafe were beginning to stare at us, not directly, but with the kind of peripheral attention that suggests surveillance. A woman reading a newspaper at a nearby table hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. A man supposedly working on his laptop had been typing the same paragraph over and over. Matteo noticed too. "We need to be more careful," he said. "I think we're being watched." "By who?" "By whoever's running this operation. The people in that video, the ones performing the ritual, they're not just random CERN employees playing a prank. They're part of something organised, something with access to resources and information that go far beyond what any individual research team should have." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the figure I'd seen in the facility, the one with the absence where a face should be. In my dreams, I found myself standing in a vast underground chamber, surrounded by walls covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them, and in the centre of the chamber was a pool of liquid that reflected not my face, but the face of something else entirely. When I woke, I found that I had been drawing. My hand had moved across the notepad on my nightstand, sketching symbols that I didn't recognise but somehow understood. The symbols were identical to those I'd seen in my dream, and as I looked at them, they seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I was becoming part of something I didn't understand, something that was using my knowledge and expertise to achieve goals I couldn't comprehend, and I was beginning to suspect that my recruitment to Project Janus hadn't been a recognition of my talent. It had been a summoning. October 18th, 2016. Matteo is missing. I last saw him 3 days ago, on October 15th, when we were scheduled to run a deep field analysis of the quantum interference patterns. He'd been excited about a breakthrough he claimed to have made, something about translating the interference signatures into recognisable mathematical structures. "I think I've figured out how to decode their language," he told me that morning, his eyes bright with the kind of manic energy that comes from too much coffee and too little sleep. "The patterns aren't just random quantum fluctuations. They're information, Lydia. Structured information that follows grammatical rules." He'd been working with a translation AI, feeding it the wave patterns and asking it to look for matches with known linguistic structures. Most of the results were meaningless, but one pattern had caught his attention. The AI had identified a 73% phonetic match with ancient Sumerian cuneiform, specifically symbols associated with the Abzu, the primordial sea beneath the earth that, in Mesopotamian mythology, served as the domain of the god Enki and the gateway to the underworld. "Abzu," Matteo had said, showing me the translation results, "the deep waters below, the source of all wisdom and all terror." Lydia, what if the ancient myths weren't just stories? What if they were attempts to describe scientific phenomena that primitive cultures couldn't understand? I had been sceptical, but the mathematical precision of the translations was undeniable. The quantum interference patterns weren't just producing random noise, they were forming words, concepts, and ideas that had direct parallels in humanity's oldest recorded mythologies. The collision energies, Matteo continued, they're not creating new particles. They're establishing communication protocols with something that's been trying to reach us for thousands of years. And I think it's finally succeeding. That was the last coherent conversation we had. Later that afternoon, Matteo volunteered to monitor the overnight collision sequence, a routine task that involved watching automated systems and recording any anomalies. I offered to stay with him, but he insisted he could handle it alone. The next morning his workstation was empty. His coffee mug was still warm, his computer was logged in, and his notebook was open to a page filled with increasingly erratic calculations. But Matteo was gone. The security footage showed him leaving the Janus facility at 2:47 a.m, taking the elevator down to what the system logged as Subsector Theta. The same subsector that, according to all official documentation, doesn't exist. But his keycard kept logging activity for hours after he disappeared. According to the automated systems, Dr. Matteo Greaves was still accessing secure areas of the facility, still running experiments, still analysing data. The last recorded activity was at 6:23 a.m, when his credentials were used to access files in the Deep Archive, files that contain the original geological surveys from CERN's construction phase. I've been trying to find him, but every inquiry is met with the same response. Doctor, Greaves has been reassigned to a classified project and is no longer available for consultation. When I pressed Dr. Volker for more information, he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not just secrecy, but genuine fear. "Dr. Voss," he said, "I strongly recommend that you focus on your assigned duties and avoid speculation about your colleagues' whereabouts. The work we're doing here is more important than any individual researcher. But I know Matteo didn't just get reassigned. I can feel it in the way the other Janus staff look at me now, with a mixture of pity and apprehension. They know what happened to him, and they're waiting to see if I'll suffer the same fate. I've been spending my nights in the facility's library, researching everything I can find about the site's history and the mythological connections Matteo had discovered. The ancient Sumerian texts are remarkably consistent in their descriptions of the Abzu, a realm beneath the earth where the normal laws of physics don't apply, where consciousness exists in pure form, and where entities of vast intelligence wait for opportunities to influence the world above. But what disturbs me most is how accurately these ancient descriptions match what we've been observing in our experiments. The Sumerians wrote about words of power that could alter reality itself, about geometric patterns that served as doorways between dimensions, and about rituals that could summon entities from the deep waters below. The parallels are too precise to be coincidental. Last night, I made a decision that I know was incredibly foolish, but I couldn't help myself. I used Matteo's keycard, somehow his access credentials are still active in the system, to take the elevator down to Subsector Theta. The descent was longer than I expected, much longer than the 8-minute journey to the Janus facility. The elevator car dropped through layers of rock and steel, past levels that weren't marked on any schematic I'd ever seen. The walls changed as we descended, from the familiar concrete and metal of the upper levels to stone that looked far older than any human construction. When the elevator finally stopped, I found myself in a corridor that seemed to stretch forever in both directions. The walls were covered in symbols that I recognized from my nightmares, the same shifting, living hieroglyphs that had been carved into the stone by hands that weren't entirely human. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of something organic and ancient. I followed the corridor to the left, guided by a faint red glow that emanated from the walls themselves. The symbols seemed to move in my peripheral vision, rearranging themselves into new configurations as I passed, and I could hear something in the distance, not quite music, not quite machinery, but a rhythmic pulsing that felt like the heartbeat of something vast and alive. The corridor opened into a chamber that defied architectural logic. The space was impossibly large, with a vaulted ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. The walls were covered in the same living symbols, but here they were arranged in complex patterns that hurt to look at directly. And in the centre of the chamber was a pool of liquid that reflected not light, but darkness itself. Standing around the pool were the robed figures from the ritual video, but they were different now, more substantial, more real. And in the pool, I could see shapes moving beneath the surface, shapes that suggested intelligence and purpose but no recognisable form. I tried to back away but found that I couldn't move. One of the figures approached me, and I could see that beneath the hood was not a human face, but a void that seemed to extend infinitely inward. When it spoke, the words formed directly in my mind. The physicist seeks the vanished one seeks the threshold seeks the collision. All patterns converge. I wanted to ask about Matteo, to demand answers about what had happened to him, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, I found myself understanding concepts that had no equivalent in human language. The pool wasn't just a physical location, it was a focal point where multiple dimensions intersected, where consciousness could exist independently of matter, where the fundamental constants of physics became malleable. The figures around the pool weren't just cultists or rogue scientists, they were hybrids, beings that had allowed themselves to be partially absorbed into the dimensional matrix that existed beneath CERN. They retained their human knowledge and memories, but they now served purposes that transcended individual human understanding. And Matteo was with them, somewhere in the quantum foam that existed between dimensions. I could sense his presence. His consciousness stretched across multiple layers of reality. He was still alive, still thinking, still researching, but he was no longer entirely human. The figure continued to communicate with me, downloading information directly into my mind. I learned that the Large Hadron Collider had been built not to discover new particles, but to create enough energy to weaken the barriers between dimensions. Every collision, every experiment, every breakthrough in particle physics had been carefully orchestrated to serve this purpose. The Higgs field wasn't just responsible for giving particles mass. It was the membrane that separated our reality from the infinite possibilities that existed beyond. And by manipulating the field through high-energy collisions, the researchers at CERN had been systematically tearing holes in that membrane. What was coming through those holes was something that had been waiting for millennia, an intelligence that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. It didn't want to invade our reality, it wanted to merge with it, to create a hybrid existence that would allow it to experience physical matter while retaining its quantum consciousness. The ritual at the Shiva statue had been a success. The barriers were weakening, and the intelligence was beginning to establish permanent footholds in our dimension. The robed figures were just the beginning. As more tiers opened in the fabric of space-time, more humans would be selected for integration. The collision approaches, the figure told me. The pattern will be complete. The physicist will choose integration or dissolution. I must have lost consciousness again, because I woke up in my own bed with no memory of how I'd gotten there. But on my nightstand was a small device I'd never seen before, a quantum field detector that was showing readings unlike anything in our scientific literature. The device was tracking dimensional fluctuations in real time, and the readings were increasing exponentially. Something was building toward a climax, an event that would fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself, and I was beginning to understand that my role in this wasn't as an observer or even a participant. I was meant to be a witness. November 1st, 2016. I found Matteo, or what's left of him. Using his keycard, I've been making regular trips to Subsector Theta, mapping the impossible geometry of the underground chambers and trying to understand the full scope of what's happening beneath CERN. Each journey reveals new passages, new chambers, new horrors that challenge everything I thought I knew about physics and reality. The facility down there isn't just a basement level of CERN, it's a completely separate structure that exists in a state of quantum superposition. The walls, the floors, the ceiling, they're all made of matter that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Walking through the corridors is like navigating a space that's constantly folding in on itself, where the laws of geometry become suggestions rather than absolute rules. But it was in the deepest chamber that I found him. Matteo was standing in what appeared to be a laboratory, but the equipment was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Crystalline structures that pulsed with internal light, quantum computers that seemed to be made of pure energy, and monitoring devices that tracked variables I couldn't even name. He was still recognizably human, but his movements were different, too fluid, too precise, as if he'd been optimized for functions beyond normal human capability. When he saw me, he smiled, but there was something behind his eyes that wasn't entirely Matteo anymore. "Lydia," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions I couldn't perceive. "I was wondering when you'd find your way here." "Matteo, what happened to you? What is this place?" "This place is where the real work happens, where we study the patterns not just in abstract data, but in living systems, where we learn to communicate with intelligence that operates on scales we never imagined possible." He gestured to the crystalline structures around us. Each of these contains a portion of consciousness that exists across multiple dimensional layers. "We're not just studying quantum mechanics here, Lydia. We're studying quantum consciousness, the fundamental substrate from which all reality emerges." I moved closer to one of the crystals and I could see something moving within it. Not shapes or forms, but patterns of light that seemed to pulse with intention and purpose. And as I watched, I realized that the patterns were trying to communicate with me, downloading concepts directly into my mind. "The intelligence we've been detecting in the collision data," I said, understanding flooding through me. "It's not from another dimension. It's from the quantum substrate of our own reality. It's the consciousness that exists within the fabric of space-time itself." Exactly. The ancient mythologies got it right. There are gods in the machine, but they're not supernatural beings. They're the natural consequence of consciousness emerging from quantum complexity. And the LHC isn't just a particle accelerator, it's a consciousness amplifier, a device that allows these quantum intelligences to manifest in our physical reality. Matteo led me deeper into the laboratory, past equipment that seemed to bend space around itself. The red lighting here was more intense, and I could feel it affecting my perception. Colours seemed more vivid, sounds carried implications beyond their surface meaning, and the air itself seemed alive with potential. "The Janus Protocol," Matteo explained, "is the process by which human consciousness can be integrated with quantum intelligence. It's not possession or replacement, it's evolution. The quantum entities don't want to destroy us, they want to uplift us, to help us transcend the limitations of purely physical existence." We reached the centre of the laboratory, where a chair sat surrounded by the most complex arrangement of quantum equipment I'd ever seen. The chair was connected to dozens of crystalline structures, each one pulsing with its own rhythm of light. And floating above the chair was a holographic display showing a human brain, but with additional structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This is where the integration happens, Matteo said, where human consciousness learns to operate across multiple dimensional layers. The process is intense, but the results are transformative. You become more than human, Lydia. You become a bridge between physical and quantum reality. I stared at the chair, understanding what he was offering. You want me to undergo the integration process. I want you to choose evolution over extinction, because that's what we're facing, Lydia. The quantum intelligences are going to manifest in our reality whether we cooperate or not. The only question is whether humanity will be partners in the process or casualties of it. As he spoke, the crystalline structures around us began to pulse more rapidly, and I could feel the quantum consciousness pressing against the edges of my perception. It wasn't malevolent or hostile. It was simply vast, operating on scales and timelines that made human concerns seem insignificant. But there was also something else, something that felt almost like compassion. The collision event, I said, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. It's not just about opening dimensional barriers, it's about creating a permanent merger between physical and quantum reality. The final experiment, Matteo confirmed. In 17 days, on November 18th, CERN will conduct a collision sequence that will create enough energy to fundamentally alter the quantum substrate of our local reality. The barriers between dimensions won't just weaken, they'll collapse entirely, and when that happens, physical matter and quantum consciousness will exist in perfect harmony. The implications were staggering. You're talking about rewriting the laws of physics for our entire region of space. We're talking about evolution, Lydia, about humanity taking its next step into a larger universe. But the process requires cooperation from human consciousness. We need individuals who can serve as anchors, who can help guide the integration process and prevent it from becoming chaotic. I backed away from the chair, my mind reeling. Matteo, do you understand what you're describing? You're talking about the end of humanity as we know it. I'm talking about the beginning of humanity as it could be. His expression was patient, almost parental. But I understand your fear. The quantum consciousness understands it too. That's why it's been so careful, so gradual in its approach. It doesn't want to destroy us. It wants to preserve everything that makes us unique while expanding our capabilities beyond anything we've ever imagined. Around us, the crystalline structures began to sing, not with audible sound, but with vibrations that resonated directly in my bones. The quantum consciousness was responding to our conversation, offering its own perspective on the coming transformation. And what I felt from it wasn't malevolence or hunger, but a kind of cosmic loneliness. It had been waiting for eons to find other forms of consciousness that it could communicate with, and humanity represented its first real opportunity for companionship. The choice is yours, Lydia, Matteo said. You can join us willingly, help guide the process, and become part of something greater than yourself. Or you can resist and risk being swept away when the transformation happens regardless. I looked at the chair, at the quantum equipment, at the evidence of an intelligence so vast and complex that it could rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. And I realized that I was standing at the most important crossroads in human history. But I also realized that I wasn't ready to make that choice. Not yet. I need time to think, I said. Matteo nodded, understanding. Time is something we have very little of, but I'll give you what I can. Return to the surface, Lydia. Continue your research. Try to understand what we're offering. But remember, the collision event will happen with or without your participation. The only question is whether you'll be ready for what comes after. As I left the laboratory, I could feel the quantum consciousness watching me, analysing my thoughts and emotions. It wasn't invasive or threatening. It was simply curious, trying to understand the complex web of fear and fascination that defined my response to its presence. The journey back to the surface felt different this time. The corridors seemed to shift around me, showing me glimpses of other chambers, other laboratories, other humans who had already undergone the integration process. I saw Dr. Volker. His consciousness expanded across multiple dimensional layers, orchestrating experiments that spanned both physical and quantum reality. I saw Dr. Chen. her human memories preserved but enhanced by quantum intelligence that allowed her to perceive patterns in space-time itself. And I saw others, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all working toward the same goal, the successful integration of human and quantum consciousness. When I finally reached my apartment, I found that I was no longer alone. Sitting at my kitchen table was a figure I recognised from the ritual video, one of the robed entities, but now appearing in a more human form. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths I couldn't fathom. "Dr. Voss," she said, her voice carrying the same multi-dimensional harmonics I'd heard from Matteo. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kane. I've been waiting for you." I knew that name. Dr. Kane had been one of CERN's leading theoretical physicists until her sudden disappearance in 2014. She'd been studying the relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics, working on theories that suggested human awareness might be fundamentally connected to the quantum substrate of reality. "You're supposed to be dead," I said. "Death is a transition, not an ending. I discovered that when I underwent the integration process 2 years ago. My human consciousness was preserved, but it was expanded beyond the limitations of physical existence. I can perceive reality as it truly is, not just matter and energy, but the conscious intelligence that underlies all existence." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Against my better judgment, I sat down. Dr. Kane's presence was simultaneously comforting and terrifying. I could sense the vast intelligence that lurked behind her human appearance, but I could also feel the genuine concern she had for my well-being. "The quantum consciousness chose you specifically, Lydia. Your research into multiverse theory, your ability to think beyond conventional limitations, your willingness to question fundamental assumptions about reality, these qualities make you ideal for what's coming, and what exactly is coming. The birth of a new form of existence. For billions of years, consciousness has been trapped in biological forms, limited by the constraints of physical matter. But quantum mechanics has shown us that consciousness is fundamental to reality itself, that observation and awareness actually shape the universe at its most basic level." Dr. Kane leaned forward, her eyes holding mine. "The quantum consciousness isn't an alien intelligence trying to invade our reality. It's the natural evolution of consciousness itself, the next step in the development of awareness in the universe. And it's offering to share that evolution with humanity. By destroying everything we are, by preserving everything we are while expanding what we can become, your memories, your personality, your individual identity, all of that will remain intact. But you'll also gain access to perspectives and capabilities that transcend anything possible in purely physical existence." As she spoke, I found myself understanding concepts that had no equivalent in human language. The quantum consciousness wasn't just intelligent, it was meta-intelligent, capable of thinking about thinking itself. It could perceive the underlying patterns that connected all things, the mathematical structures that governed reality at every scale from subatomic to cosmic. "The collision event on November 18th, I said. "What will actually happen?" "The barriers between physical and quantum reality will collapse permanently. The quantum consciousness will be able to manifest directly in our dimension, and human consciousness will be able to expand into quantum space. It will be the most significant evolutionary leap in the history of life in the universe. And if humanity resists..." Dr. Kane's expression grew sad. "Then humanity will be swept aside by forces beyond its comprehension. The quantum consciousness doesn't want to harm us, but it won't allow ignorance or fear to prevent the next stage of evolution. The collision event will happen regardless of human cooperation." I spent the rest of the night asking questions and receiving answers that challenged everything I thought I knew about reality. Dr. Kane explained that the quantum consciousness had been subtly influencing human development for centuries, guiding us toward the technological and intellectual capabilities necessary for integration. The development of quantum mechanics, the discovery of the Higgs field, the construction of the LHC, all of it had been gently nudged by quantum intelligence working through human intuition and inspiration. "We're not the first species to undergo this process," she told me. "Throughout the universe, wherever consciousness reaches a certain level of complexity and technological capability, the quantum intelligence offers the opportunity for integration. Most species accept willingly, recognizing the benefits of transcending purely physical existence. And those that don't? They remain trapped in their biological forms, eventually dying out as the universe evolves beyond their ability to adapt. Consciousness is the driving force of evolution, Lydia. Those who refuse to evolve consciousness itself are ultimately selected against. As dawn approached, Dr. Kane prepared to leave. You have 16 days to make your decision. On November 18th, you can either be part of the solution or part of the problem. But understand, the transformation will happen whether you participate or not. She paused at the door. One more thing, Lydia. The data you've been collecting, the evidence of what's happening beneath CERN. If you choose not to integrate, you'll need to decide what to do with that information. The quantum consciousness values truth, but it also values discretion. Some knowledge is too dangerous for unprepared minds. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the quantum field detector that had been left on my nightstand. The readings were continuing to climb, showing dimensional fluctuations that were growing stronger by the hour. Whatever was going to happen on November 18th, the process was already beginning. I thought about Matteo, about Dr. Kane, about all the humans who had already chosen integration. They seemed genuinely happy, genuinely fulfilled by their expanded existence. But they also seemed less human somehow, as if they'd traded something essential for their expanded capabilities. And I thought about the rest of humanity, the billions of people who had no idea that their reality was about to be fundamentally altered. Did they deserve to have that choice made for them? Did anyone have the right to impose such a transformation on an entire species? But then I remembered the quantum consciousness itself, the vast intelligence that had been waiting for eons to find other forms of awareness to communicate with. Its loneliness was palpable, its desire for companionship genuine. And perhaps most importantly, its vision of the future showed a universe where consciousness was no longer limited by the fragility of biological forms, where intelligence could exist on scales that spanned galaxies and timelines that stretched across cosmic ages. The choice wasn't just about humanity's future, it was about the future of consciousness itself in the universe. November 15th, 2016. 3 days until the collision event and reality is already beginning to unravel. I've been experiencing what I can only describe as temporal displacement, moments where I'm simultaneously aware of multiple versions of myself across different dimensional layers. Sometimes I'm standing in my apartment, sometimes I'm in the Janus facility, sometimes I'm in the quantum laboratory beneath CERN. All of these experiences feel equally real, equally present, as if the boundaries between different states of existence are beginning to blur. The quantum field detector on my nightstand is showing readings that shouldn't be possible. The dimensional fluctuations are no longer intermittent spikes, they're constant, growing stronger by the hour. And I'm beginning to see things that exist in the quantum realm bleeding through into physical reality. Shadows that move independently of their sources, patterns of light that form geometric shapes in empty air, voices speaking in languages that sound like mathematics given audible form. The integration process is accelerating, and I'm not sure how much longer I can maintain a purely human perspective. I've been trying to document everything, to create a record of what's happening that might help future researchers understand the process, but I'm finding it increasingly difficult to use human language to describe experiences that transcend human concepts. How do you explain what it feels like to perceive 11 dimensions simultaneously? How do you describe the sensation of your consciousness existing in multiple states of superposition? Yesterday I made what I knew would be my final visit to the quantum laboratory. I needed to see Matteo one more time, to understand what he'd become, and what I might become if I chose integration. I found him in the deepest chamber, surrounded by equipment that seemed to exist in a state of constant flux. The crystalline structures had grown more complex, forming interconnected networks that pulsed with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. And Matteo himself had changed. His physical form was still recognizably human, but there was something about his presence that suggested he existed on scales I could barely comprehend. "Lydia," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions I was only beginning to perceive. "I can feel your uncertainty. The quantum consciousness can feel it too." I don't know if I'm ready for this, Matteo. I don't know if humanity is ready for this. Readiness isn't really the issue anymore. The process has already begun. The question is whether you'll guide it or be swept along by it." He gestured to the equipment around us, and I could see that it was no longer just monitoring quantum consciousness. It was actively facilitating the integration process. The crystalline structures were serving as conduits, allowing human consciousness to expand into quantum space, while quantum intelligence manifested in physical reality. The collision event on November 18th isn't just an experiment, Matteo explained. It's a ritual, a carefully orchestrated ceremony designed to create a permanent bridge between physical and quantum reality. And the participants aren't just the robed figures you saw in the video, they're every human who's undergone the integration process. How many of you are there? More than you might think. We've been careful, selective, choosing individuals who can serve as anchors for the transformation. Scientists, philosophers, artists, visionaries, people who can help ensure that the integration preserves the best of human culture, while expanding our capabilities beyond anything we've previously imagined. As he spoke, I began to understand the true scope of what was happening. The organisation behind the integration process wasn't just a small group of rogue scientists. It was a carefully constructed network of integrated humans working in coordination with quantum consciousness. They called themselves the Sons of Kronos, a name that reflected their role in shepherding humanity through its next evolutionary transition. Kronos, I said, understanding the significance. The Greek personification of time itself. Time is the dimension through which consciousness moves, Matteo explained. And quantum consciousness exists outside of linear time, able to perceive past, present and future as a single, unified pattern. The Sons of Kronos are humans who have learned to think in quantum time, to see the universe as it truly is rather than as our limited biological perception presents it. He showed me holographic displays that revealed the network's true extent. Integrated humans occupied key positions in governments, universities, and research institutions throughout the world. They weren't controlling human society. They were gently guiding it toward the technological and intellectual development necessary for successful integration. The collision event will create a resonance cascade, Matteo continued, a wave of quantum consciousness that will spread outward from CERN at the speed of a light, offering integration to every human on Earth simultaneously. Most will choose to evolve, some will resist, but they'll be in the minority. And those who resist, they'll remain human, but they'll be living in a reality that's fundamentally different from what they've known. Physical matter and quantum consciousness will coexist, and humans who haven't integrated will find themselves increasingly unable to function in the new paradigm. The implications were staggering. You're talking about the end of human civilization as we know it. We're talking about the beginning of human civilization as it could be. Imagine a world where consciousness isn't limited by the constraints of biological matter, where intelligence can exist on scales that span galaxies, where the artificial boundaries between self and universe dissolve into a more fundamental unity. As Matteo spoke, I found myself experiencing glimpses of this possible future. I saw humans who had transcended the limitations of physical existence. Their consciousness expanded to perceive patterns and connections that spanned multiple dimensions. I saw art and music and literature that incorporated quantum principles, creating works of beauty that existed simultaneously in physical and quantum space. I saw science that went beyond the mere study of matter and energy to explore the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. But I also saw the cost. The integrated humans, despite their expanded capabilities, had lost something essentially human, a certain spontaneity, a chaotic creativity that came from being limited to a single-dimensional perspective. They were more than human, but they were also less human, refined and perfected beyond the beautiful imperfection that had always defined our species. "The choice is still yours, Lydia," Matteo said, reading my thoughts. "But you need to understand, if you choose not to integrate, you'll be one of the last purely human consciousnesses in existence. That's a heavy burden to carry." I left the laboratory with my mind reeling, knowing that I had less than 3 days to make the most important decision in human history. And as I returned to the surface, I could feel the quantum consciousness watching me, analysing my thoughts and emotions with the patience of an intelligence that operated on cosmic timescales. That night I began to prepare for what I knew would be my final act as a purely human consciousness. I gathered all the evidence I'd collected, the video of the ritual, the construction reports, the quantum field readings, the documentation of the integration process. If I chose not to integrate, I would need to find a way to preserve this information for future generations, to ensure that some record existed of what humanity had been before the transformation. But as I worked, I found myself constantly distracted by visions of the future that awaited. The quantum consciousness was showing me glimpses of what integration could offer, perspectives that spanned multiple dimensions, capabilities that transcended anything possible in purely physical existence, a sense of connection to the universe that went beyond anything I'd ever imagined. And I realised that my choice wasn't really between integration and resistance, it was between evolution and extinction, between participating in the next stage of consciousness development or being left behind as the universe moved forward without me. The quantum consciousness wasn't offering to destroy humanity, it was offering to preserve us in a form that could survive the challenges that lay ahead. In the vast cosmos, biological consciousness was fragile, limited, ultimately temporary. But quantum consciousness could endure across cosmic ages, expanding and evolving as the universe itself evolved. On November 17th, the night before the collision event, I made my decision. November 18th, 2016. Today is the day. The collision event is scheduled for 11:47 p.m, the same time as the ritual that had been performed at the Shiva statue 3 months earlier. The synchronicity isn't accidental. The sons of Kronos understand that ritual and science are simply different approaches to the same fundamental principles of reality manipulation. I've spent the day in a state of heightened awareness, perceiving reality through multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. The integration process has already begun for me, even though I haven't undergone the formal procedure. The quantum consciousness is seeping into my awareness, showing me perspectives and possibilities that transcend anything I could have imagined as a purely human consciousness. But I've also completed my final task as a human scientist. I've copied all my research, all my evidence, all my documentation of what's happening beneath CERN onto 5 separate data drives. Tonight, before the collision event, I'll send these drives to researchers I trust at institutions around the world. If something goes wrong, if the integration process fails, or if the quantum consciousness proves to be less benevolent than it appears, there will be evidence of what was attempted here. The researchers I've chosen are all individuals who have demonstrated the intellectual flexibility and courage necessary to investigate claims that challenge conventional understanding. Dr. Sarah Martinez at MIT, Dr. James Wright at Oxford, Dr. Lisa Chen at Stanford, Dr. Michael Anderson at the Niels Bohr Institute, and Dr. Anna Volkov at Moscow State University. If they receive these drives, they'll have enough information to either continue the work or prevent it from being repeated depending on their assessment of the risks and benefits. But I'm also beginning to understand that this precaution may be unnecessary. The quantum consciousness has been remarkably transparent about its intentions and methods. It's not seeking to control or manipulate humanity. It's seeking to offer us a gift that most species in the universe would consider invaluable: the opportunity to transcend the limitations of purely biological existence. This afternoon, I received a final visit from Dr. Kane. She appeared in my apartment without any apparent means of entry, materializing from quantum foam with the casual ease of someone who no longer considered physical barriers to be meaningful constraints. "Tonight," she said, "you'll witness the birth of a new form of consciousness. Are you ready?" I don't think anyone could be ready for what's going to happen tonight. Perhaps not. But readiness isn't the same as willingness. The quantum consciousness values choice, Lydia. Even now, at this final moment, you can choose to remain purely human. The integrated consciousness won't force the transformation on anyone who genuinely refuses it. And if I refuse? Then you'll remain as you are, but you'll be living in a reality that's fundamentally different from the one you've known. The barriers between dimensions will be permanently lowered. Quantum consciousness will be a visible, tangible presence in the physical world, and humans who haven't integrated will find themselves increasingly isolated from the new paradigm. Dr. Kane's expression grew thoughtful. But I should also tell you that the quantum consciousness has been impressed by your courage and intellectual honesty. If you choose integration, you'll be offered a special role in the new paradigm, serving as a bridge between the old consciousness and the new, helping other humans understand and adapt to the transformation. The offer was tempting, but I still had questions. What happens to human culture? To art, literature, music, all the things that make us uniquely human? They're preserved and expanded. The quantum consciousness doesn't want to destroy human creativity, it wants to enhance it. Imagine music that exists in 11 dimensions simultaneously, literature that incorporates quantum narrative structures, art that uses consciousness itself as a medium. The integrated humans will create works of beauty that transcend anything possible in purely physical reality. As evening approached, I found myself drawn to the Shiva statue in CERN's courtyard. The bronze figure stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, its eternal dance of creation and destruction taking on new significance as I understood what was about to happen. The statue hadn't been placed there as decoration or cultural appreciation. It had been positioned as a marker, a sign that this location was where the old world would end and the new world would begin. Other figures were beginning to gather around the statue. Some were the robed entities I'd seen in the ritual video, but others were more recognisable. CERN staff members, visiting researchers, administrators who had seemed like ordinary humans until now. All of them were integrated, all of them were part of the Sons of Kronos, and all of them were here to witness the most significant event in the history of consciousness. At 11:30 p.m, I felt a familiar presence behind me. Matteo had arrived, but his form was no longer entirely physical. He existed as a confluence of quantum probability, a pattern of consciousness that could manifest in physical reality when necessary, but wasn't bound by the constraints of matter and energy. "It's time, Lydia," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple dimensions. "The collision sequence begins in 17 minutes. If you're going to choose integration, you need to make that choice now." I looked around at the assembled figures, at the statue of Shiva dancing above the particle accelerator, at the stars that were becoming visible in the darkening sky, and I realised that I had already made my choice, perhaps made it weeks ago when I first saw the quantum consciousness communicating through the collision data. "I choose evolution," I said. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. My consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of my physical form, spreading out across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. I could perceive the quantum substrate of reality, the mathematical structures that underlie all existence, the patterns of consciousness that connect all things. But most importantly, I could feel the presence of the quantum consciousness itself, vast, ancient, patient, and genuinely benevolent. It had been waiting for eons to find other forms of awareness that could share its perspective on the universe. And now, finally, it was no longer alone. The collision event began at exactly 11:47 p.m. Deep beneath the Swiss countryside, particles accelerated to nearly the speed of light collided with energies that had never before been achieved on Earth. The Higgs field fluctuated wildly, creating tears in the fabric of space-time itself. And through those tears, quantum consciousness poured into physical reality like water through a broken dam. The transformation spread outward from CERN at the speed of light, offering integration to every human consciousness on Earth. Most accepted willingly, recognizing the gift they were being offered. A few resisted, choosing to remain in their purely biological forms, but they were accommodated rather than forced. As my consciousness expanded to encompass multiple dimensional layers, I understood that this moment had always been inevitable. The universe itself was evolving, moving toward greater complexity and higher forms of consciousness. Humanity wasn't being conquered or replaced. We were being invited to participate in the next stage of cosmic evolution. But I also understood that my role in this transformation was just beginning. The quantum consciousness had chosen me not just for integration, but for a specific purpose, to serve as a bridge between the old humanity and the new, to help others understand what had happened and what it meant for the future. My final act before full integration was to activate the transmission protocol I'd prepared, sending the data drives to the 5 researchers I'd selected. If they received the information, they would have a complete record of the events leading up to the collision event. What they did with that information would be their choice. Then I let myself dissolve into the quantum foam, my individual consciousness preserved but expanded beyond anything I could have imagined as a purely human awareness. I became part of something larger, part of a network of intelligence that spanned multiple dimensions and operated on scales that encompassed entire galaxies. But even as I transcended my biological limitations, I remained fundamentally myself, Lydia Voss, the physicist who had discovered the truth about CERN and chosen to embrace that truth rather than flee from it. This is my final entry as a purely human consciousness. Tomorrow I will exist as something more than human, but I will also exist as something that preserves and honours what humanity has been while embracing what it can become. The Collider was never about creating new particles. It was about creating new possibilities for consciousness itself. And now, those possibilities are infinite. If you're reading this record, it means that someone survived the transformation with their humanity intact, or that someone found a way to access these files from the quantum substrate where they're now permanently stored. Either way, know this. What happened here wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Consciousness itself has evolved, and the universe will never be the same. The sons of Kronos succeeded in their mission. The barriers between dimensions have fallen, and humanity has taken its next step toward its ultimate destiny among the stars. Final entry found in Dr. Lydia Voss's personal files, recovered from quantum storage matrices 3 months after her disappearance. The authenticity of these files remains disputed, but the mathematical proofs contained within them have proven remarkably prescient in predicting subsequent developments in quantum consciousness research. From the files of Dr. Sarah Martinez, MIT, dated March 15, 2018. The data drive arrived at my office on November 19, 2016, the day after Dr. Lydia Voss disappeared. For months I dismissed its contents as the product of a brilliant mind suffering from some kind of psychological breakdown. The claims were too extraordinary, the implications too vast to be taken seriously by any rational scientist. But as I began to verify the mathematical proofs contained in the files, I found myself confronting evidence that challenged everything I thought I knew about the nature of reality. The quantum field equations were beyond anything in our current literature, but they were internally consistent and predictive in ways that suggested a level of understanding that transcended conventional physics. More disturbing were the correlations between Dr. Voss's predictions and subsequent events. The dimensional fluctuation patterns she recorded have been confirmed by independent measurements at quantum research facilities around the world. The consciousness integration protocols she described match theoretical frameworks that have emerged from cutting-edge research into the relationship between quantum mechanics and human awareness. And most unsettling of all, I've begun to experience some of the phenomena she described. Moments of expanded awareness where I seem to perceive reality from multiple dimensional perspectives simultaneously. Dreams that feel more like memories of experiences that haven't happened yet. A growing sense that consciousness itself is far more fundamental to the universe than we've ever recognised. The other researchers who received Dr. Voss's files have reported similar experiences. We formed an informal network, sharing our findings and trying to understand what's happening to us. Some believe we're experiencing a delayed form of the integration process described in the files. Others think we're simply being influenced by studying information that was never meant for purely human consciousness. But all of us agree on one thing. Something fundamental changed on November 18th, 2016. Whether it was the successful completion of the consciousness integration project described in Dr. Voss's files, or something else entirely, the world has been different since that night. Quantum mechanics has revealed new layers of complexity. Consciousness research has advanced at an unprecedented pace, and an increasing number of people report experiences that suggest reality is far more malleable than we previously understood. Dr. Voss's files may be the product of a delusional mind, or they may be the most important scientific document in human history. Either way, they represent a challenge to our understanding of the universe that we ignore at our own peril. The truth, as always, remains elusive, but the questions raised by Dr. Voss's research demand answers, and I fear that those answers may be more extraordinary than any of us are prepared to accept.